Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1176 of the War News Stream. And today we've had a massive showdown in the Gulf of Finland between Estonia and Russia, with Estonia trying to seize a Russian oil fleet tanker today, and Russian fighter jets invading NATO airspace to get there and respond to that. A major showdown today. Also, Putin refuses Ukraine peace talks, and the EU has sanctioned Russian oil once again. Today, we have massive news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of a significant development that has occurred today inside the Gulf of Finland, as we have been able to hear that Russian aircraft have intercepted and stopped an Estonian attempt to board and commandeer a Russian shadow tanker vessel that appears to have had direct connections to the Russian government, as Russian Air Force assets as well as other naval assets raced to the scene to force the Estonians to withdraw. An armed showdown did ensue, resulting in the Estonians fleeing from the scene, and currently the Russian shadow tanker vessel is being allowed to transit through the Baltic Sea largely unopposed. We have also been able to hear that in the process of this, the Russian aircraft involved in the interception, Su-35s, were actually flying through Estonian airspace and breached the airspace in the course of this event, meaning that not only were the Russian Federation engaging in an armed standoff with a NATO country, but also they violated their airspace and national sovereignty at the exact same time. Meanwhile, moving on from that news, we have been able to hear in other terms that the talks in Istanbul have already collapsed before they were to begin, as we are hearing that the Russians are not even sending Sergei Lavrov or any other kind of deputy minister. It now appears that they're sending a no-face, no-name, nobody to represent the Russian Federation at the upcoming talks in Istanbul, which are technically supposed to start tomorrow, although in their time, those talks are starting within just a couple of hours at this point. We have also been able to hear inside of the Russian government, once again, that Putin will not be attending these talks, And there is absolutely no plan to speak to Zelensky one-on-one on ending the war inside of Ukraine. On top of that, we have also been able to hear that Ukrainian armed forces have continued their bombing operations against the Russian Federation inside of Kursk and Belgorod, and have also continued to conduct raids wherever necessary to continue to weaken the Russian defensive forces in these regions and push them farther back. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have also been conducting heroic defensive efforts throughout the entirety of the front line in the Donbass, and we have also been able to hear outside of that there are now ongoing uprisings in both Libya and Pakistan, as the Balochistan freedom fighters have now declared independence from Pakistan, meaning that the entirety of southwestern Pakistan is stated that they are now in active armed rebellion against the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and are attempting to break away to create an independent country. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that civil war is now broken out in Libya, and we've been able to see massive riots and armed action now occurring throughout the city of Tripoli, as it appears that this is now devolving into another Libyan civil war. Meanwhile, there's also been other news in other regions around the world, as we've been able to hear that the Iranians are now stating that they will not submit to American blackmail on any of the terms in a nuclear arrangement, meaning that they're once again completely backing out the idea of finding any kind of common ground with the United States on a nuclear deal. This is about the ninth time they've done that so far. We have also been able to hear that the Saudi Arabians are now conducting precision strikes once more on the Yemeni Houthis inside of western Houthi-controlled Yemen, as we were able to see that a Houthi jeep with a commander inside was destroyed today in the process of a Saudi airstrike. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that France is now stating that all Caesars produced in the production year of 2025 will be transferred to the Ukrainian army, and in the meantime, the United States of America has also made it quite clear today the implications of Russia not reaching a peace deal or a ceasefire with Ukraine in Istanbul tomorrow, as we have been able to hear that, according to the President of the United States, if the Russians do not reach a peace agreement with Ukraine, the support soon to be provided to Ukraine is beyond the imagined, and I quote, exact words from the president. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that the president will also not be arriving in Turkey, considering that Putin will not be present, and it would largely be a complete waste of the president's time to go and talk to a no-name, no-face nobody from the Russian Federation, which in the large part, all of them are no-face, no-name nobodies, including Putin. Nevertheless, we have a massive amount of news today, a huge amount, as a matter of fact, and especially inside the area of the Gulf of Finland. This is something that has actually ended up being quite a major ordeal today, as it is the first time that we've ever seen Russian armed forces actually conduct a direct armed showdown anywhere within the Baltic Sea so far, during the duration of the Ukraine war conflict. Moving us on up into the area and near to the island of Gotland, which we can see right here, which is actually a Russian island. So let me zoom in here and really quickly show you all this island. This is the island of Gotland. It is pretty much completely uninhabited, save for this small little fishing village or largely outpost. And we can also see down near its southern coastline, the South Hogland Lighthouse. Hogland is actually where they say Chris's mom was from, and they also say that Putin was once raised on the islands of Hogland. They also say that Sergei Lavrov was also born on nearby Horseland, which is another island inside of the Gulf of Finland. Nevertheless, the incident that we are about to be talking about actually occurred just south of the island of Gotland, or as we would call it here in the West, Hogland. And this incident involved a vessel that was flagged by the nation of Gabon as a tanker vessel that was leaving the port of Ust-Luga, which isn't that far away from this area. It's actually right there near to Kuskilovo, and it was transiting out of the area of the Gulf of Finland and into the open world to once again take sanctioned Russian oils into the open market and to attempt to make some kind of money for the Russian Federation's government. We actually were able to see video and picture evidence from the vessel of the Estonian forces attempting to board and seize the vessel and impound it in the name of the government of Estonia, enforcing the sanctions implemented by the United States of America against Russian oils in the global market. And we can actually see this happening from the bridge of the vessel Jaguar, which was the one in question today. We can see here them observing.
Oh, look at that. It's the Estonian helicopter literally circling right around it. This is from the bridge of the Gabon flagged vessel, right?
Yeah, this is from the bridge of the Jaguar, which is the vessel that was flagged by the nation of Gabon as an oil tanker. So this is actually footage from the ship that was soon to be impounded, at least at this moment in time.
That's wild. It's a pretty ballsy response right there, honestly, to see Estonia with such a coordinated response going after the ship. That's pretty strong.
It is a pretty strong response.
This Estonian warship, Papa 6732. Your request will be denied. Follow my instructions. Alter your course to 105 immediately. Over.
Really quickly, if y'all would like to know the kind of assets that were involved by the Estonians, we actually did hear that the vessel identified itself as Patrol Vessel 6732, which is actually a Raju-class patrol vessel of the Estonian Navy. This is actually that specific vessel that was making the call right there. This is a smaller coastal patrol vessel of the Estonian Navy. The Estonian Navy doesn't have a large amount of heavy or large tonnage surface combatants or vessels, and so this actually is a somewhat larger representative of the Estonian Navy inside the area. The helicopter that appears to have been circling the Jaguar as well, which we can see right outside of the window right there, also appears to be a possible French Super Puma, which is operated by the Estonian military. And really quickly, let me go see if I can type in Estonian military equipment, so that way we can go and show you all this specific helicopter, which hopefully will be showed under their supply tab. And so let me see if I can go and get this vehicle for all of y'all to really quickly see. Let's see, Estonian Air Force. I'm assuming that it may be under the Air Force equipment. So let's see if we can get that. Let's see here. They have aircraft, radar, and it doesn't appear that the helicopter is actually under this list. So let me see if I can find y'all where this is. So reconnaissance aircraft, fighter aircraft, bombers, multi-role flying boats, helicopters. So it appears that that was, interestingly enough, it actually doesn't appear that they have a Super Puma. That looks a lot like a Super Puma, however. That is not an Mi-17 for sure.
Estonian warship.
So we actually cannot identify the helicopter. It is an Estonian helicopter, but we actually can't identify it because, at least according to their equipment tab that we can find here publicly. Go ahead.
So that would be an AW-139 is the helicopter name. And I just found that here on a different post that they made about this situation. So it's an AW-139. I'm not sure who makes that, maybe Airbus, but that's the designation.
So it's Augusta
Westland.
So it would be a Italian helicopter, actually, that was provided, I guess, to the Estonian Navy, although we still can't find that on any equipment tabs anywhere, at least so far. So that's a little bit interesting to see. Nevertheless, let me go see if we can actually see if the operator list is the Estonians. Because it appears that we have a primary user list here, but let's go look at the user map. Actually, we might be able to find it in here. And I'm still not seeing where Estonia would be listed anywhere, at least at this point. So that is really interesting to see. It actually appears that nowhere is showing that the AW-139 being operated in that video is actually being operated by Estonia. So it may have been another NATO force in the area that was actually operating that AW-139 as a part of the joint task force that has been organized by NATO, which I believe is called a Valiant Sentry, if the mission name is correct. That may have also been operating in conjunction with the Raju, which is an Estonian military vessel that was hailing the ship and telling them that they were no longer going to be allowed to transit the Gulf of Finland, and they were to be impounded by the Estonian authorities.
Ship Papa 6732. Your
Also, I just saw really quickly, everyone, that apparently everyone's saying that I did pass it. I'm just trying to quickly do this on air. But it does appear that Estonia actually was on the list as the operators, but as the civilian versions of the helicopters, not a military version. So this may be a civilian version being used by Estonian special forces to attempt a boarding of this vessel.
request will be denied. Follow my instructions. Alter your course to 105 immediately. Over.
Yes.
Oh, look at that. There's the Russian jet on camera, too.
Yeah, and we can actually see the Su-35. We can confirm that is an Su-35 of the Russian Air Force, which I'll quickly pull up for y'all right here. This is the Sukhoi Su-35. This is not the exact tail number that we saw in the video, but this is still a general stand-in for the Su-35 aircraft that did arrive on scene and immediately began to conduct an armed standoff with the Estonian vessels and aircraft that were in the area, forcing them to actually retreat from the vessel and not impound the vessel, which we can see in the clip right here.
And that appears to be an M28 Skytruck plane that the Estonians are operating as well.
We can also see the coastal patrol vessel literally coming up alongside the tanker.
Did the Naval Patrol come up beside it like this before or after the Su-35 showed up from the Russian side?
It appears that all of these videos are being showed in sequence, so it appears to have come up alongside the ship after the Su-35s had arrived on scene.
Interesting. That's a interesting move because, since they decided to abandon detaining the vessel because they got scared that the Russians showed up with their fighter jets, they were still trying to do something like getting really close to the ship. But then they must have figured. I wonder who made that call, by the way. Like, was it a really top commander that made the call, or was it the patrol boat here that decided to break off on their own accord?
It may have been, I'm not really sure how it will work. There's actually several ways that the order to call it off may have been conducted. It may have been that the Raju, which is the vessel that we're seeing right here, saw the aircraft arrive on scene, confirmed it visually, and then reported back up the Estonian chain of command that Russian aircraft had arrived on scene and may have requested how to move forward. And then the orders came down from the top that they were to withdraw and not engage in boarding and impounding the vessel, because that may create some sort of an escalation that they wouldn't be able to respond to at the moment. Or it could have been that when these aircraft, the Su-35s, actually breached Estonian airspace, which we'll be explaining here in a second, that actually pretty much flagged that situation as a major one for the top brass in Estonia to look at. And so then the order to withdraw was given from the top without really any communication being conducted by the coastal patrol vessel. It could have been either way, and there's possibly a whole bunch of other ways that could have ended up as well. But nevertheless, some sort of an authority higher up actually gave the order to call this off, because there was most likely a higher up authority, such as a higher up commander or a general, that gave the orders for this vessel to be impounded after it started to reach international waters in the Gulf of Finland. So either way, it looks like there was possibly a higher level calling off of the operation to impound the vessel by the Estonians once the Russians started to make a pretty heavy armed presence on scene, and quite literally an armed showdown between the two sides. When you see the Estonian coastal patrol vessel continuing to circle the oil tanker.
That's a fine-looking patrol vessel, by the way. Just on a side note, that's a very fine-looking ship.
Yeah, that thing is really clean, man. Honestly, man, you know what it looks like? It looks like those Lego police boats that they used to have when we were kids. Like, it's really
like
clean.
Mission Impossible style boat. Really, really stylish looking.
Oh yeah, dude. These things are top of the line right here for a coastal patrol boat. Honestly, like a small yacht.
I think the Estonians are setting a bad precedent here, because by abandoning their detainment efforts of the vessel, which I believe they probably had the rights to detain because it was once again violating the sanctions on Russia, they're setting a bad precedent because they let it go after the Russians showed up with their fighter jets. So the Russians have now proven they can scare off the Estonians and actually force them to abandon their detainment efforts in the future. So now they've shown their card, because if Estonia didn't go out to try to detain the vessel, then the Russians would have been left guessing, basically. So I don't know. Like, it seems like it's going to make the Russians more emboldened in the future.
And that is an interesting note right there as well. But we can continue to see that the Raju is encircling the vessel. And also, Matthew, I just saw a claim made by Paul Campbell in the chat. Can you see if we can get a follow-up on that and confirm that the Jaguar was actually impounded by Swedish authorities instead? Because I'm actually seeing that some people are saying that later in the day, the the Jaguar was impounded by Swedish authorities and is now in port somewhere around Gotland Island, impounded by another NATO country. However, we were able to confirm that once the Su-35s arrived on scene, and while Matthew's trying to get that information, I'll explain to y'all more of the story that we know right now. These Su-35s apparently took off from a Russian Air Force airbase somewhere within the Leningrad military district surrounding St. Petersburg, flew through Estonian airspace to the site, and then arrived on scene and began to orbit the area. We were not able to get a close look at the kind of armament or complement of weapons that these Su-35s had on board, so we were not able to confirm whether they had any anti-ship abilities that would have actually posed a significant threat to the small coastal patrol vessel that the Estonian authorities had on scene. Nevertheless, the armed standoff was serious enough that the Estonians did withdraw from the attempt to impound the vessel, and the Jaguar was allowed to move on its way once more and was able to leave the area around the Pig Island for the large part, and has now left the area of the Gulf of Finland at large. At this moment, we are still trying to get a continuation of the story, as there was a statement in the chat that we haven't been able to get a lot of follow-up through on so far, that apparently the Jaguar may have been impounded at a later date somewhere around Gotland, although we didn't hear about that through the course of the day. And Matthew, I was wondering, do we have any follow-up on that to see if that statement was true or not from the chat?
Okay, so remind me, where's the port that's flagged out of? Is it Gabon, correct?
Yes, it is Gabon.
Okay, so based on the current tracking data of the ship, it looks like it did arrive in Primorsk, Russia. So it made it through and it was not detained. It looks like they let it go and the vessel is free. It did transit to its location it was actually destined to go, which is Primorsk. So no, nobody detained it. It made it through.
And you mean Primorsk is Primorsky Krai in near Vladivostok?
No, it's up near St. Petersburg. They're calling that Primorsk.
Let's see here.
There it is, right there on the coast.
That would be a little bit interesting because from what we were able to see, it appeared that it continued to leave the Gulf of Finland later today. So let me see if I can show that right here.
So the ship was actually inbound to Russia. It was not outbound from Russia. It was coming from Sika Ankh. I'm not really sure what that is, to be perfectly honest, but it was coming to Russia to offload a shipment. So it was not leaving Russia. It was going to Russia.
And can we get that name of the town again? Can you spell that? Sika Ankh?
Yes, it's Sikka space ANCH.
Let's see. It looks like we had this. I couldn't find a Sika Ankh, but we could find this Sika, which is in India, actually. So it was coming from India.
It sounds like an Indian name.
Yeah, so it appears that it was a Sikh uncle that it was coming from, and it was heading to Primorsk somewhere in Russia. So nevertheless, it does appear that it was able to make it to port after the Russians intercepted the attempt by the Estonians to impound the vessel, which is making it quite clear at this point that shadow tanker vessels are actually operated by the Russian Federation under false flags of other foreign nations, and they actually are using them as an official extension of Russia. This armed action today is the first one that we've ever seen by the Russians, where they have actually gone out of their way to protect one of these oil tanker vessels in any kind of a circumstance ever before. And this has completely lifted the veil on this shadow fleet, which is moving it from, are they possibly some sort of a Russian shadow tanker vessel, to all of them actually are working for the Russian Federation's government and attempting to continue to make money for the Russian Federation. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts on this entire situation so far, and a lot of people are saying that the Russians have goofed and exposed themselves in a situation where they didn't really have to. They pretty much exposed themselves and have shown that all of the shadow fleet tankers really are operating for Russia, and there's really no question about that from this point. A lot of people are also saying that Estonia needed to follow through and pretty much ignore the Russian attempt at pretty much intimidation and continue to impound the vessel. Others are saying that Estonia went overboard with this, and they shouldn't have gone out and tried to impound a vessel that was violating U.S. sanctions. And some others are saying that they're unsure and undecided at the moment, and they don't really know what to make of this at this time. But Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 46% of the audience said Russia goofed and exposed themselves by exposing the fact that they have a fleet of Russian oil tankers that are considered shadow fleet vessels, while 41% said Estonia needed to follow through with the detainment, and 5% said Estonia went overboard by trying to detain the vessel in the first place. And like I kind of said earlier, unless Estonia was going to follow through, they should have never gone out to try to take the vessel in and impound it, because now what they've done is they've allowed Russia to officially scare them off around their own territory and they're near their waters. And now they've set a bad precedent, because now Russia knows they can scare the Estonians away. So they can do that time and time again and keep getting away with this. And now Estonia has been made to look very weak, in my opinion. Now, once again, I'm not dishing on the Estonians. I'm not saying anything negative about them, but the precedent and their action they took today actually weakens the NATO response. So I would say by not following through, they actually did more damage than they actually helped by trying to go out and seize the vessel. So Estonia definitely needed to follow through, or they didn't need to do it at all. So I'm with the 41%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, and really quickly, let me check this right here, because I wanted to check the territorial waters map in this region and see what we have. And all of them are really blurry. Let me see if I can get one that isn't blurry. Oh man, isn't it fun when we try and find maps on stream, folks, and then there's none? Oh my lord. Okay, so here we go.
What are you looking for? A territorial waters map of Estonia?
Of the Gulf of Finland, and I have this one, but it's very blurry. But beyond that, it does appear that we are able to get a general outline of Finnish waters, Russian waters, and Estonian waters. And interestingly enough, at least where the vessel was attempted to be impounded, which is here to the Gogland Island or Hogland Island, it actually appears that the Hogland Island actually was within Russian territorial waters at the time that the Estonians attempted to impound the vessel. So that is a little bit interesting right there, because at least based off of what we can see right here, where the ship was back on the move again, and let me show you all this. We can see that the vessel appears to have gone adrift somewhere around right here and started to drift closer and closer to the Goglan Island as the Estonians were attempting to impound it. That actually means that Estonian coastal patrol vessels were inside of Russian territorial waters attempting to seize the vessel.
Very disturbing, and also considering the fact that the aircraft, the fighter jet, violated Estonia's airspace as well to get there, like a complete violation of all territorial integrity of Estonia today. And once again, this is not even a Russian vessel. This is a vessel that was simply transporting products for Russia, and it's not even their own flagged vessel, which is quite interesting.
But also I do have to say this though, on a fair note, because I don't know if you're reading the chat. The Estonian vessels actually went into Russian waters to attempt to seize the vessel.
They went into their water, and how do you determine that?
Because if we're looking at this map right here, which was showing the location of the Jaguar, and we can see right here where it went adrift and it started drifting towards the Goglan Island, and then it restarted its journey and headed back towards a Russian port. If this is the area, which it had to have been, where the Estonians attempted to stop and impound the vessel, or if it was even right here, our map of the territorial waters are showing that that entire area is actually inside of Russian territorial waters and not Estonian waters.
And is this the current map showing it? Because it says 1940 to 1985. Is that the most current one?
This appears to also be another recent map, although it's very grainy and we really can't read it too well. And also, let's see if we can find another map of the territorial waters. And let's see here. Trying to see if we can find anything a little bit more recent. Territorial waters really don't change often, though, so I doubt that that's changed much. So let me see. Let me just put in territorial waters of Estonia, and maybe that'll give us a better look. So, yeah, that appears to clearly be on this map as well, inside of Russian territorial waters. That doesn't appear to be an international corridor, Estonian waters, or Finnish waters. That appears to clearly show the Goglan Island, which is about right where my mouse cursor is at least a dozen or several dozen nautical miles inside of Russian territorial waters, at least from what we're seeing right here.
Interesting. So my only question at this point is, when did Estonia initiate the initial contact to tell them to basically come to port because they were going to impound the vessel? Because even though we're seeing on the map that they stopped them around the Gotland Island, it basically depends on where they initiated it, because the vessel could have kept steaming toward the island and gotten into Russian waters while the detainment was already in progress.
They could have been the case, but the thing is, though, is that we are seeing that this says the Jaguar oil tankers on the move again, heading eastbound, and based off of the islands that we're seeing right here, that's showing that the vessel once again picked up speed and began on its journey. I see a lot of people saying that it was near the Gotland Island. If we're going off of the geolocation that we're seeing right here, that's not the Gotland Island. The Gotland Island's all the way down here. And not only that, if it was the Gotland Island, it wouldn't have been Estonian authorities seizing a Russian vessel in Swedish waters. That would make no sense. The OBS has disconnected for a moment. I don't know why that's starting to happen recently a good bit. I don't know if YouTube's having connection issues or what. But it is back. Sorry about the lag there for a second. So
let me give you those info. So I'm actually going to give you the tracking data from the ship. We can actually look at it on a big screen. I'm going to send this to you over Discord. Let's take a look at it and examine it here for a second, because I'm a little bit interested by this issue here. Was it even in Estonia's waters in the first place? Nobody's brought that up at all today. So punch in Jaguar up there in the top search box. It actually didn't bring it over for whatever reason. Jaguar, and then look for the one that says crude oil tanker, and it says GA for the abbreviation. Scroll down a little bit. You'll see it. There it is.
So let's take.
And go ahead and press view on live map. And here we'll give you a track of where it came from and where it went to port.
Okay, so where do we get the track? Oh, past track.
Maybe past track right there. There you go.
So it appears right here. That appears to be where the tracking started. And if I'm correct, if I'm not mistaken, let's see if this is true. Yeah, so the colors on the line are showing the different types of speed, apparently, that the vessel was undergoing at any given moment. So it appears that it had stopped completely and had gone adrift right outside of the Hogland Island, not the Gotland Island, like a lot of people are trying to make it out to be. And once again, that doesn't make any sense, because I do have to point this out to people, that the Gotland Island is not Estonian waters. Those are Swedish waters. So it is up to the government of Sweden to impound a vessel that is in Swedish waters. It's not Estonia's responsibility. So if the Estonians actually were attempting to impound the vessel near to the area of Hogland Island, I gotta be honest with y'all, folks, that actually would be a violation of Russia's sovereign waters if they were attempting it literally just a mile or two off the island, like it's suggesting right here. And the Russians actually had a pretty decent reason to actually conduct an armed standoff, at least from what we're seeing right here.
That might explain it, maybe, but at the same time, though, for whatever reason, the tracking data is only starting from the point where they were allegedly stopped, where the ship actually came to a stop. And I don't know why that is, because, of course, it came all the way from its initial starting point, which was not in the Gulf of Finland. So I'm not sure why that's the case. And the fact that we don't see the actual track is interesting. Surely, though, surely they didn't initiate contact right at the island and it stopped at the island, because the ship, I presume, kept going until the patrol caught up to it.
Well, I mean, if you look at this, I'm like playing a real time of it. Here's the vessel right here. You can literally see as the hours are passing here, the vessel is not moving and it is adrift right off the island. Well, so that appears to me to show that the vessel was actually attempted to be impounded right near to Hogland Island, which, as we can see by the territorial waters map, that actually is clearly within Russian waters.
Yeah. I'll say this right now. I'm not very sure if that is the case or not, because we don't see the entire tracking data. But if it was in Russian waters, then that was not the purview of Estonia to go after it. But if they started the detainment in Estonian waters, and I would say if they carried it over sort of into Russia's economic zone, their waters, then maybe it could be explained or argued that that was justified. But the fact it's in their waters whatsoever, that's a bit interesting.
Well, I mean, looking at it right here, though, if we were to go back and let's see when this info was coming out. So this was coming out at 1:49 in the afternoon, which would line up to, let's see when the first video came out here, at least on Twitter. So this came out at 6:28 p.m. Let's see, do we have, I cannot find any timestamps, because this is actually showing that at least UTC time, this was 7:28. And so if we had a time conversion for 7:28 UTC to Central Standard Time, which is what we're working off of here on the show, we could probably try and line it up and see if these videos were coming out remotely close to when we're seeing the vessel adrift here. And it also does appear that this vessel is adrift, which makes no sense. Just to put this out there, vessels don't stop, they keep going. When a vessel is stopped and idle anywhere, it's losing money. When it's underway, that's when it's actually making money, is it's getting from port A to port B as quick as possible and transferring some type of goods or money from place to place. So at least at this point, it does look to me like this vessel actually was stopped and attempted to be impounded inside of those waters. Let's see if we can see any island outside in the video.
65 miles, sir.
So fast forwarding here.
Also, by the way, if you're having audio issues, refresh the page for your stream and it will fix it, by the way.
And I would have to actually say really quickly, Matthew, I think that this geolocating info right here is correct. It appears that the attempt was actually made inside of Russian territorial waters, at least from what we could tell.
Yeah, if that is the case, and that changes the equation just a little bit. Also, by the way, I see people, they were asking me to see if I could track the Estonian patrol ship and see if I could find its track. They actually do not provide that data. They show its location right now in real time. It's right in the smack dab middle of the Gulf of Finland right now, and it's a pretty good distance back away from the island where the Jaguar took off from. So I'm not very clear what the case is right here. It could be that maybe the Jaguar went and stopped next to that island, and maybe the patrol lagged back, and the footage we're seeing is from the initial contact. I feel like we're missing something here, because I have a hard time believing that Estonia, knowing that Russia is very hostile toward them, would take that bold step of going right into Russian economic waters and try to seize that vessel. That seems like that would be a hell of a move, and I'm having a hard time believing that.
Let's see here. So we can actually go back. We actually can go to yesterday. So let's see what we get for yesterday. And that's still showing the same thing here. So let me see if we can try and get something that would show us a different period of time, maybe a different day. So let's see if we can go for custom, and we are going to go. And it actually doesn't give us a custom. I think we probably have to get a membership to Marine Traffic to actually show it. But still, it does appear, at least from what I can tell, that it looks like the vessel stopped. Because once again, if the impounding attempt is over and it's stopping inside of Russian waters, that still makes no sense because the Russians aren't going to stop, but they're going to tell it to keep going. So it wouldn't really make a lot of sense that it would stop at Hogland for no reason after everything's done and over with. It would keep going to port because the company that would run the vessel wouldn't want to stop because it would be wasting money and sitting around burning time and being unproductive. So from what I can see, it actually does appear that Estonia attempted to impound the vessel while it was inside of Russian waters, which is probably the reason why there was an armed standoff today. We didn't actually know that going into this because the geolocation appeared to have shown that it was a little bit further off inside of international waters, but it actually appears that it may have been in Russian waters during the time of the impounding attempt, which would largely create an armed standoff because and I know some people are trying to justify this, but I got to explain this really quickly with how international law works. That's Russia's territorial waters. If they're not in international waters or inside of NATO waters, there's nothing you can do. Estonia does not have a sovereign right to march into Russia's waters and attempt to impound vessels. That actually would cause a armed standoff, and the Russians actually would have a legitimate reason for conducting an armed response in defense of their own territorial sovereignty, much like Estonia would have a reason to defend their own waters and territorial sovereignty as well. So a little bit of an interesting development there to see with that one.
But the only problem here, I'm seeing one crack forming here in the theory. If the Russian Su-35 violated Estonia's airspace, then if the ship was in Russia's waters, then surely that's not Estonia's airspace. So how's a jet violating Estonian airspace by flying over the ship or flying near it if it's in Russia's waters? That doesn't really line up.
Well, it could have flown. Let's go get a map of let's see, Estonian
because
airspace.
you saw the fighter jet. The Russian fighter jet was way in front of the tanker vessel. It was not behind it, toward Estonia. It was in front of it by a pretty decent long ways.
So this is the airspace of Estonia right here. This is the entire area that's controlled by Estonia. So if the Russian aircraft took off and then flew somewhere, say over Hogland, and then it flew in an orbit and then it circled around, it could have flown into Estonian airspace because that's easily possible with the kind of distances that modern aircraft cover. Because an aircraft just conducting an orbit, waiting to land at an airport, can largely fly over half of the lower UK, just attempting to orbit, waiting to land at Heathrow. So it's not out of the question to say that an Su-35 could have easily just conducted an orbit, flown through Estonia's airspace, and then back up, and possibly as a provocative act as well to the situation. But from everything that we can tell, I mean, the geolocating evidence doesn't lie. The vessel was stopped for hours right outside of Hogland Island, and there's no other reason that it would have done that unless the Estonian authorities had told it to stop and they were going to impound and seize the vessel.
Interesting. Honestly, I'll say this: the evidence appears to prove what you're saying, but I feel like we're missing something here. Like there's bits and pieces to this story to me which is not adding up completely, and I think we're missing some crucial piece of information here. Like once again, I wish we had the entire tracking data for that vessel, the Jaguar, from its point of when it entered the Gulf of Finland all the way to Russian port. Because we're missing the first half of the tracking data. That's one thing. Also, we really don't know when initial contact was made. We don't know that either, and we don't know how far the ship went before it was actually stopped next to that island. So a lot of things we really don't know, and I'm not sure if we'll ever get the answers to that because they're not making that public.
Actually, really quickly, someone brought up a good point.
Your request.
It appears that there's actually some GPS data here on the radio right here, which we can type in.
Let me type that in. Let's see here.
Let me see if I can get a clear view of it for you, because it doesn't really look like the camera was focused.
This is
So
Estonian warship, Papa 6.
Let's see here. It's really hard to make out.
732.
So it looks like the best I can get you is this is for latitude 59434123, and then longitude appears to be there's something in front of it. I can't tell if that's a 0 or a hashtag, but it appears to be either 024 or 2427 7720.
We'll see what that pulls up. We'll see here. I think we're missing some digits here. Let's see. Longitude, latitude.
And we're going to be waiting.
Stall for just a second here while I try to get this into my system to see if I can find this location.
And we're going to be waiting to try and figure that out. And also, folks, if you're having sound issues, it's not our problem, it's a YouTube problem, so you have to refresh your YouTube for the audio to be able to work. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know why YouTube's been doing that lately, but hopefully refreshing it will fix it. Also, by the way, Sax2 is saying that apparently it's 7729. Not 7720 on the longitude on the last four numbers. But we'll be waiting to see what we come up with here because we're trying to find out where in the world this vessel was when this video was being filmed. Because if it actually is near the Hogland Island, like the geolocating on Marine Tracker is suggesting, that actually means that this may have been an illegal attempt to seize and impound a vessel inside of Russian territorial waters, which the Estonian Navy has no sovereignty or jurisdiction to be able to conduct that kind of an action. But we are still waiting to see if that is the case, because depending on our answer here, exactly where this was, this can end up resulting in either the Russians. Go ahead.
So it looks like these coordinates right here put us right off the coast of Ghana. So this is off of Africa. So this is not the coordinates.
Let's see. That is interesting. I wish we could.
Your request will be denied.
So let's see here. It's so hard to make out the numbers. I think you can see my screen as well as I can, Matthew. The numbers are so blurry; it's almost impossible to make them out. So let me just put.
I would have to take an image of this. I'd have to like enhance it like in Photoshop and enlarge it to get the numbers actually off of it because I can't really make it out myself either.
So let me see if I can try something here. Let's see, 5443.
Also, like I see people saying they were GPS spoofing. Most likely they were not GPS spoofing. It's probably accurate coordinates. We're probably simply not getting the accurate numbers here because it's so blurry. We're probably misreading the numbers. It's possible they're spoofing, but I doubt it.
Let's see. Let's see here. Estonia. I don't know why this needs that, but let's see what we get. Okay, so now this is giving me a location in the middle of. Well, this actually is showing in the dead middle of Estonia. So I'm getting some kind of a number off in there. I don't know which one. But it is somewhere up in that area. I mean, it wouldn't really make sense that a literal vessel that you could see in the dead middle of the ocean would be spoofing its own GPS number because you can literally see the thing, So it's like the Estonians are pulling up on it like they're, like the ship is saying, oh, yes, we're off the coast of Ghana instead of, right near to that area. So that we'll have to try and figure it out, but nevertheless, there actually is a little bit of ambiguity around this. Nevertheless, there was a NATO armed standoff that did occur, at least today, in between Russia and the Estonians, which has resulted in a decent amount of tension between the two sides. And during the Russian fighter jet response, NATO's airspace was violated by the jet over Estonia, and a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And many are saying that NATO should respond forcefully. Others are saying it depends on the location of the vessel. Others are saying that NATO should let this slide, and others are saying that they're unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like about 54% of the audience said NATO should respond forcefully to the fighter jet invading Estonia's airspace, while 25% said it depends on the location of the vessel, and 12% said NATO should let it slide. And I would say right now, since there's a dispute of whether or not the vessel was being detained in Russian waters or Estonian waters or international waters, right now we're really not clear which one's the case. And that's an interesting topic to bring up because so far today, nobody's brought up the issue of where the vessel was actually being detained at within the Gulf of Finland. So right now it could have been in Russian waters based on what we're looking at. We just simply don't know right now. I have a feeling we're missing something though, and I'm going to try to do some more research in just a minute to figure this out and get to the bottom of it. But I would say that if it was in Estonia's waters, then NATO should respond forcefully because any fighter jet intrusion of Russian people on Estonia, that should be dealt with forcefully. But at the same time, though, if it's in Russian waters, we can't go too overboard because Estonia messed up by going into their waters. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I would say 24%. It depends on the location of the vessel. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it would also have to depend on the location of the vessel. I would say I would largely be with the 54%. If this was inside of international waters or Estonian waters, there should be a serious armed response to the incident. This is a violation of sovereignty, and not only that, an intimidation tactic against a NATO country. However, I do have to point out that so far from what we were able to see on Marine Tracker, the vessel was stopped for a prolonged period of time near to Goglan for hours on end adrift, which possibly suggests that the attempt to impound the vessel was actually made near to the Goglan Island. If that is the case, that is clearly inside of Russian waters, and while I'm a pro-American and pro-Western person, I also work off the concept of international law. The Estonian Navy has absolutely no right to police or impound vessels that are actually inside of Russian territorial waters. Pretty much, it's like the Wild West. If they attempted to stop that vessel and then it raced its way into Russian waters, that crossing of the border in the international waters to Russian waters makes that vessel a free vessel, at least at the moment, until it attempts to leave Russian waters again. So I would have to say that I would largely have to be with the 25%, or well, the 24%. It really depends on the exact location of the vessel, because if it was in international waters or Estonian waters, then we entirely had a right to impound the vessel, and the Russians have conducted an aggressive armed action against Estonia, which is a NATO member. If Estonia somehow raced into Russian waters and attempted to impound a vessel inside of Russian territorial waters, then that actually could have caused an unnecessary provocation of that we really didn't need to see go down, and I would say that there really should be no response, and we should tell the Estonians to exercise caution when attempting to impound vessels, especially in the attempt violating the sovereignty of a hostile nation's territorial waters, which could result poorly. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that the best I can. Once again, folks, we're going to be trying to figure out more off air on exactly where that was, because it seems as though there's a decent amount of ambiguity about exactly where that was. And I also saw someone say that it was 35 nautical miles northwest of Tallinn, which would actually put it all the way over here somewhere in the middle of the international corridor heading towards Russia. And I don't know if that would be true or not, because that means that a Russian aircraft would have flown literally all the way out of the Gulf of Finland to pretty much make it to this area. So that would be something that I have to say right there for the large part. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on from that news and on into the remainder of our news, as we're able to hear in larger terms elsewhere that NATO naval exercises have concluded, including 50 ships in the Baltic, Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Norwegian seas. We actually were able to see some of these exercises and their formations in the different areas of the waters that NATO were conducting the exercises in, and it was pretty impressive. You can actually see one of the British aircraft carriers in this picture right here. We love to see nice pictures of the navies of NATO hard at work out there in the naval exercises, and once again continuing to show the force posturing that NATO is taking around the entirety of the world. Meanwhile, we have been able to hear that talks appear to have completely collapsed that are going to be happening here in just a few hours inside of Istanbul, as we have been able to hear that apparently Russia is not sending a single minister. This is the text of the order: to approve the following composition of delegation of the Russian Federation for negotiation with Ukraine. Medinsky VR is stating, and also really quickly before we move on, we actually have an update to the story. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so I've been doing some looking here because I'm curious to see what the Russians and Estonians are claiming about this situation. And now that there's a dispute of where the vessel was when it was actually initially detained, when the Estonians initially tried to detain it, the question is, where was the vessel? So the Russians are claiming on all their media that the vessel was transiting international waters, which is a corridor right in the middle of the Gulf of Finland. And then the Estonian Navy came out and tried to make the vessel leave international waters and then enter Estonian waters, so that way they could detain the vessel. That's what the Russians are claiming. So even the Russians are saying they weren't in Russian waters, they were in international waters. The Estonians are claiming that they were in international waters the entire time, and the Estonians are asserting that they have the right under international maritime law to board the vessel, inspect it, and therefore detain it for a short period of time to determine what the vessel was doing. So it appears to be that both parties are saying it was in international waters and was not in Russian waters. It appears to be the case, based on the tracking data, the vessel actually sped up to try to enter Russian waters as fast as possible when the initial detainment was started, but it looks like when it was initially started, it was in international waters.
Interesting. So it does. So with that in mind, I would go with the 54%. There should be a strong armed response to the Russian aggression that has been conducted today, considering that both sides now are making it fairly clear that almost the entire incident actually did occur in international waters and apparently not near Hogland Island, which is in Russian waters. So with that, I hope that does address that well. It seems as though we were able to get a conclusion to that story. And moving on from that, now that we've been able to try and do our best research possible on air and make sure that we're covering the news as best as possible to y'all instead of just putting out slop like other people do, we are now going to be moving on into Istanbul, as we have been able to hear that this is the Russian delegation that is going to be brought on in to talk to Zelensky about ending the war, to approve the following composition of the delegation of the Russian Federation for negotiations with Ukraine. This is going to be the head of the negotiators, Medinsky VR, assistant to the president of the Russian Federation. So they're sending the secretary to go talk to Zelensky.
That's pretty low.
That's pretty low. Who else is going to be joining him? M.U. Galushin, Deputy Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. So he isn't even the Minister of Foreign Affairs. This is just another no-name nobody from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, along with the Secretary to Putin, who is also going to be a member of the delegation. Then we have Kostyukov, who is the head of the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, and A.V. Fomin, who is the Deputy Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, who is also a member of the delegation. We also have, to approve the following composition of experts for negotiations of Ukraine, A.S. Zorin, the first deputy head of information of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, Podbrivskaya, who is the deputy head of the Office of the President of the Russian Federation for State Policy in the Humanitarian Sphere, and then Polishuk, who is the director of the Second Department of the CIS countries of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then Shevstov, who is the deputy head of the main Department of International Military Cooperation of the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And this is a list of no-name nobodies. The whole thing, like, if y'all notice, folks, it is a deputy head or an assistant in every single way. There is actually no one here who holds any real power, at least at this moment, in any kind of a situation, in any facet of the Russian government. This is absolutely lame right here. This is actually a pitiful display, and this is going to be showing us that nothing is going to be coming out of this at the moment in the following up negotiations in Istanbul, because it is quite clear at this point that if the Russians' head of the delegation team is an assistant to the president, that is literally nobody. He holds no power. He's not Lavrov, who is the Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. This guy is literally just a paper-pushing secretary that works in Putin's office. He doesn't even have really any authority, honestly, to negotiate on the Russians' behalf, or really a senior enough position to show respect to the state of Ukraine in these talks. This is showing us entirely that the Russians have no goodwill or good faith in these negotiations, and this is going absolutely nowhere. Nowhere at all.
Seems intentional, really. Like, they could have sent Lavrov. Like, Lavrov is the appropriate person to send if Putin's not going to show up. And the fact that they're not sending him, which, of course, he's never had any success at all in negotiating peace talks because he's basically a mouthpiece for Putin. He has no autonomy whatsoever. So even with them not sending Lavrov, that seems to be an intentional jab at Zelensky, because, of course, Zelensky is showing up personally this time, which makes it a much higher profile negotiation than previous times. And now Putin's decided to downgrade the negotiator to the lowest level possible, and he's not even showing up himself. And also, the U.S. president said he's not bothering to show up either, because if Putin's not there, then he's not bothering with it. He's totally just going to check out when it comes to that whole situation.
And we were able to hear that the president of the United States is not going to Turkey to join the Russia-Ukraine talks, because Putin is not going to be present. And we also got to hear this, which is a very interesting statement, according to Yermak inside of Ukraine. The president of the U.S. said that if Putin refuses a peace deal, the U.S. will provide Ukraine with support, and I quote, beyond what it can imagine. And I really like this phrase, according to Yermak. So it appears that the Ukrainians are optimistic that these talks are about to collapse, and not only is the war going to continue on, but the U.S. may provide even further support to Ukraine than has ever been seen, or beyond what Ukraine can even imagine, that has been provided through them over the entirety of the war. And a lot of people have heard about this today. This has been a pretty significant development, because these talks, mind you all, are actually going to be beginning here just within the next few hours. We believe that they're, I think, going to be starting at around around 8 in the morning in local time in Istanbul, which should only be, I believe, about 2 or 3 hours from now at this moment, meaning that these talks will actually begin and fail right after we go off air. And a lot of people are mixed on this because Ukraine did say that the United States has assured them that if Putin refuses a peace deal, they'll get tons of aid, once again, beyond what it can imagine. And a lot of people have been putting in their 2 cents on this one, and it seems as though there's a mix of opinions here. Some are saying, almost half of everyone saying, that they believe the U.S. officials. The other half are saying that they do not believe the U.S. officials. Some people are saying it depends on the details, and some are also undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so this poll is almost evenly split, almost precisely. So about 38% said, I do not believe the U.S. officials will actually give Ukraine tons of aid once Putin is determined to have refused a peace deal. So 38% said, I believe the U.S. officials, and only 16% said it depends on many different details. And I would say this. The first step here, of course, was Putin to accept a ceasefire. He has refused to accept a ceasefire. Now he's refused to even show up for the peace talks that he himself proposed. He came out and made a huge deal about accepting these peace talks in Istanbul. For now, he's not even going to show up. He's not even going to send Lavrov. And now he's sending some assistant who just like is basically like a water boy out here to go do negotiations. That is a complete joke. And we should be slapping sanctions on Putin right this minute instead of waiting for Putin to call the shots. We should be putting them on him right now. And also, we should be saying ahead of time, we're going to already start arming Ukraine to the teeth because it's already shown a lack of unseriousness. It really doesn't matter what happens tomorrow because the guy there does not even have the decision-making power to make anything happen. So it's meaningless. Zelensky shouldn't even show up, to be honest, because it's really validating the game playing, and he should just go right back to Ukraine because it's pointless. So I'm going to say that it really depends on many details. Whether or not the U.S. actually follows through and actually arms Ukraine to the teeth, that's another story because, of course, they have sort of said this and then backed off of it so many times over that it's hard to say this is a surefire thing that the USA is actually going to give Ukraine everything it needs. So it's just hard to tell on that front. I'm going to say I'm with the 16%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would largely have to believe the U.S. officials. I'm putting a lot into that right now because once again, there really is no reason to believe anything the U.S. officials are saying. Just to be completely frank, because they say a lot and they usually change their opinions from day to day. So a little bit hard to hedge my bets on this. But I'm going to believe at the moment and be a bit of an optimist here that I would believe the U.S. officials and actually think that there's going to be a large amount of support and probably a massive wave of sanctions soon to follow, because this can only go on so long. I mean, whether people like the president or not, or whether people have seen that the president has given, in many of their opinions, including mine, too many passes to the Russians to just keep doing stupid stuff and getting away with it, there has to be some kind of a limit, and I feel like the limit is largely being reached right now. There's just really no way that we can watch this collapse. The first real peace attempt that was supposed to begin, and Putin originally said that he was going to go down and talk about peace, and then he backed out, and then he also didn't send any real ministers, and then he sent junior ministers that really have no negotiating power or any kind of ability to dictate what the Russian Federation would really do. They have absolutely no authority at this point to actually come to an agreement with Ukraine in this negotiation, showing that it was designed to fail by the Russians, and it's another major insult. There really is no way to go forward on that without looking like an absolute clown, and might as well put on the giant red nose and the rainbow afro if you were to just ignore that and keep moving on and pretending like the Russians actually will seriously take peace into consideration. So I think at this point, I would have to say that I'm going to be with 37% that say that they believe the U.S. officials, and I would have to say that if these talks do not work, this is most likely going to result in the state of Ukraine actually getting more military support, and also the Russian Federation having significant sanctions leveraged against them. Although, once again, I'm hedging a pretty significant bet on that, because I'm saying that right now, and the U.S. government could get up tomorrow and then say the entire war is Ukraine's fault again. So, I'm putting a lot out there on the line, but that would be at least my opinion for the moment. But still,
I think ultimately, though, I think Zelensky's still going to show up to these peace talks, even with the water boy being the one leading the negotiations, because I think he's under so much pressure from the United States that he really doesn't want to risk going right back to Ukraine and just abandoning the whole Istanbul situation. He'll probably show up just for the appearance of it, and obviously nothing's going to come out of it because the guy there can't even really say he can do anything because he has to go back to Putin and report, which is the same thing that's been happening for months and months and months, and no progress has been made. So it's just going to be for the appearance of it. Unfortunately, Zelensky's going to have to jump through yet another hoop to at least appease the United States, so that way he doesn't get on their bad side and offend anybody's ego. So hopefully on the other side of it, he gets what he needs, but I'm still a little bit shaky.
I would have to say I would agree. I'm pretty shaky on it as well. But I would still say I'm going to try and be an optimist here, folks, and say that we would do the logical action, which has not been done yet, which is that we're going to sanction the Russians heavily and then provide Ukraine with a large amount of military support from this point on. That's what I'm thinking. But once again, folks, while I'm saying that I'm going to be an optimist here, I could easily eat my words tomorrow. So, I just want to put that out there. I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to push that as the actual, this is the thing, this is the law sort of an opinion here, because once again, it's an opinion, and, opinions can always be wrong, and this one, especially is running a great risk of being wrong on my end. I'll already admit that publicly. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news that we have been able to get today, which there is quite significant news still coming from all over the world. There's an ongoing civil war in Libya. There now appears to be some sort of an uprising in Pakistan that's now going on. We also were able to hear that the Saudis are airstriking the Houthis. The Iranians are pretty much backing out of agreeing to anything with the U.S. on a nuclear deal. France is also talking about sending all their seasons to Ukraine. There's been a load going on out there, and also all the Ukrainian frontline news. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure that we address a couple of questions here, and also I want to address this as well, because this is something that I've seen tonight that is quite impressive. Tonight at the peak so far, we've actually reached 10.6 thousand live viewers. We're actually at our peak right now, and so far 51,000 people have watched this stream since it started. And I got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching so far. And if you have enjoyed, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. We are wildly close. I'm not even kidding y'all. We are 50 subscribers away from 355,000 subscribers. And if you have not subscribed at this moment and you hit subscribe, you might actually be able to lay claim to being the 355,000th subscriber on the channel. Because it's not that far away. It's really about 45 away at this point. And so if you hit subscribe, you might actually be able to make it to 355,000 subs. Not trying to make y'all subscribe, but if you want to lay the claim to a perfect round 1,000th subscriber spot, it's actually pretty close to being nigh at this point. But anyways, with that, I hope we were able to address that somewhat well. And also, let's get a couple of questions, man, because I understand that we've had some pretty interesting ones thrown in. I want to get to a couple before we get into the rest of the news.
All right, so our first super chat of the night is going to go to David Dornblaser, a channel legend, and thank you very much, David, for the $101 support, and we do appreciate that very much. And David did not leave a comment, but we do appreciate that very much. That is massive support, the largest of the night, in fact, and of course, that does help you keep the channel running, and we sincerely do appreciate it. But thank you very much, David. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you massively for the huge support, David Dornblaser, and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We saw you throw in the $1 super chat, and we're like, and I said to Mandy, "Oh, well, look, it's David." I was like, usually he throws in 100, and then you threw in 100 right after that. We were like, "Oh, dang!" We were like, "Look at that!" And I got to thank you massively for the huge support, because you didn't throw in a comment, but folks like you with that massive kind of support, and really everyone with every type of support, even if it is $1 or $500, all help this channel to be possible and keep it running. Y'all help us be able to do this as a job and keep this thing rolling day in and day out. And I've got to thank you massively for being one of those folks who enjoy the channel a huge amount and help us to be able to make this thing a possibility every single day, and to make sure to get on air every day and cover what's going on around the world every 24-hour cycle. And so with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for that massive support.
Yes, indeed. And our next super chat goes to another channel legend, longtime viewer, Susan LUK, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Susan, as well, for the generous support. And she said, "I'm out of touch. What happened to the peace talks?"
Well, a lot has happened to the peace talks, Susan L. That is a really good question. So to run through the whole process. Also, by the way, folks, just want to point this out. We are now only 10 subscribers away from 355,000. So if you subscribe, you're going to be quite close to getting it. But beyond that, To answer your question, Susan L., which is a very good one, the peace talks have been pressured to happen, and we have heard that Russia says that they like to talk about peace, but there are some preconditions, and then they pushed out the same preconditions they've always pushed out for months now, and so then the U.S. said it's make it or break it time. Y'all either have to talk your way into a ceasefire, or we're going to start screwing the Russians over. So then Putin came out a couple of days ago and said that he actually would agree to talks, and I believe that was the 10th of May, the day after the Victory Day parade. He said that he would agree to talks that would occur in Istanbul on the 15th of May, that he would personally attend, and they would actually talk about creating an unconditional ceasefire, which is a little bit weird because why in the world do you need to talk about a ceasefire that needs no preconditions? It seems as though there really isn't a lot of talking to be done there, and everyone could just agree to the ceasefire through the third-party intermediary, which is the United States. Beyond that, however, several days passed. Putin then backed out, I believe about 2 days ago, of arriving in Istanbul and talking, and then he said, I'm going to pick the crew of people that will go down there and talk as the Russian delegation here within the next day or two. So today he finally picked the delegation, and the delegation doesn't even include any heads of any ministries of Russia. It is all assistants and deputy ministers, which really don't even hold any real power or decision-making power within their own specific ministries that they are being sent from. So pretty much what's happened is that the Ukrainians have gone all in with good reason. It's a great diplomatic move by the Ukrainians, and really in a global geopolitical move, it's actually a great move as well. Zelensky has gone all in pretty much to humiliate himself publicly to make a point by sending pretty much all of the senior members of the Ukrainian government along with himself down to Istanbul to sit around and wait for the Russians to bring a whole bunch of no-name nobodies that don't even hold any real power within their specific ministries to show up, and then what they're going to do is that they're going to say to Zelensky, we want the Ukrainians to give up the rest of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. We also want the Ukrainian army to demilitarize, and we also want elections to be held in Ukraine immediately, even if it is in the middle of wartime, against the constitutional articles of the Ukrainian constitution. That's probably what we're going to hear really soon, probably within the next few hours in Istanbul, and at that point, the talks have completely fallen apart. And then people are wondering, well, why in the world would Zelensky humiliate himself? And this is probably the question you'd be asking, Susan L. Why would Zelensky go out of his way to humiliate himself, now seeing that this is the clear avenue the Russians are going to take? What better way to show what the Russians are going to do when you literally have Zelensky sitting there getting embarrassed himself at the highest order that the Ukrainian government could be embarrassed at, the presidential level? There's no other way to get around that. That's quite a clear message that even if Ukraine went all in, I mean, Ukraine has put all of their chips on this talk right now, really just to appease the United States and show exactly what the real situation is like, which is what we've been saying here on the channel for years now. The Ukrainians actually would take peace seriously if the Russians would consider it seriously, but the Russians aren't, and every chance that they've had to actually try and get into some serious talks and end the war, the Russians come into it with the most absurd demands that no country would ever agree to, and the Ukrainians are about to show that clear as crystal in Istanbul here tomorrow. And so with that in mind, I hope that addresses that well, and I thank you for the massive support, Susan L., and help with the channel to keep on running, and I hope that also addresses why all of this is going on. And I see some people are saying this, and I'll address this really quickly because I see a lot of people saying something that I'm not including. The whole reason that Zelensky is going to Istanbul at all is because of the President of the United States, but I do have to say, folks, that this is the perfect trial by fire to anti-Ukrainian statements is what he's doing. I mean, like, Zelensky is actually playing this pretty damn well. I mean, honestly, Zelensky's making the Grand Chess Master of Russia look like a fool, because Zelensky found out instead of acting out the world in the way that we all knew it would work, he said, what if we just went with this delusion that the President of the United States has that the Russians really want peace? What if we just weaponized that? Because we know that's not the case. What if we just weaponized that belief to show with undeniable proof and evidence the Russians really do not want any peace? And that's what Zelensky's doing. When you think about it like that, it isn't the President of the United States dragging Zelensky through the mud to make him look like an idiot. Zelensky is actually dragging Putin and the President of the United States through the mud, because he's not only showing that the United States President is working off of a completely false assumption, he's also showing that the President of Russia is a damn liar and a fool that walked right into this trap for the Ukrainians to clearly show to the world tomorrow that the Russians do not have any true intent on achieving a peace unless if it means absolute victory. victory, which is not an amicable peace. That is just winning and winning, and as a result, the war ends. That's what they're going to be attempting to achieve tomorrow on the Russian side, and the Ukrainians are going to be achieving, once again, showing the entire world what the Russians are really about, like they did throughout the entire first year of the war. So I would say it's a great move by Ukraine. I mean, this is actually, I would say, folks, as far as a diplomatic move, this is paramount to genius, really. Like, I would actually, I don't know, Matthew, if you would agree, but this is actually quite a genius diplomatic move by the Ukrainian side to pretty much weaponize peace to quite truly show what the Russians are about without any doubts being held afterwards.
Yeah, and really, unfortunately, he's not really weaponizing peace. He's just going through the motions at this point, and he wouldn't be doing that. Zelensky would not have been forced into this position if it hadn't been for the U.S. sort of like pushing him to that point. Because in reality, honestly, if we lived in a perfect world, Zelensky would have simply gotten all the tools he needed to finish the job, and also gotten the sanctions that he needed to put on Russia to cripple their economy, and the war would be pretty much trucking along right now to its conclusion. But the problem is we're like in a bit of a limbo state where Zelensky is being forced to jump through these diplomatic hoops. And he's working well with the situation he's been handed, but at the same time, it's not optimal. It's obviously not optimal whatsoever. So I think he's making a genius move under the circumstances, but at the same time, he is having to go through some, like, I guess you could call it humiliation. Really not humiliation, but it's sort of like, it's stooping down the president's office of Ukraine just a little bit, having to jump through hoops, which they shouldn't have to do because they're the victim in this situation. But I would say by doing what he's doing, it is pretty genius and under the circumstances.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the cards he's being dealt, I would say this is diplomatic genius at this point, because, the Ukrainians could have continued to dig themselves a hole, because we do have to remember, folks, that the American logic from the president, the current president, is that the war is going on because Zelensky and his government wants the war to keep going. They're the true obstacle to peace. The Russians really do want peace because they're these good, upstanding, noble people, and Putin is a great man. That was the original rhetoric that was coming out of the president of the U.S. That was almost what it was. So then Zelensky is going, no, I'm not going to even talk to him because Putin isn't a nice guy and the Russians aren't nice people. They are a bunch of virulent, war-hungry warmongers in this country, and they want nothing but total victory in Ukraine. And I'm not talking to him because we're not going to achieve anything. So then the president whipped out, oh, look, see, the Ukrainians don't want peace. They're lying about the Russians and their true nature because Zelensky wants to continue to steal more money from America and keep the war going to enrich himself in his pocketbook. And so then Zelensky said, no, I'm not, but we need support because the Russians are wanting total victory. There's no way to actually talk to him. So then the president just kept on going on with that. See, look, the Ukrainians really don't want peace and they're the problem. And so then Zelensky finally said, okay, fine. If you think that, let's have peace talks then. In fact, I'll go meet Putin down in Istanbul right now and in this war at this very moment. As a matter of fact, let's go into ceasefires right now. How will the Russians agree to an energy ceasefire? The Russians agreed, and then they broke it in 2 hours. Then they agreed to another one, and they broke that one within 5 hours. And then they agreed to a limited air and naval ceasefire, which was immediately broken by a Russian airstrike within the first day. And they've broken 3 ceasefires so far. Then also, now Zelensky is saying, I will take this to the highest level. I will actually meet Putin in Istanbul and talk about ending the war, and I actually will not put any preconditions on the ceasefire. All they have to do is agree, and we will have a complete ceasefire for 30 days. Now he's making the Russians show their cards. So now, because of the reality of the situation, now Zelensky is going to show it isn't the Ukrainians that are keeping the war going, it's the Russians. Because now when Ukraine says, we will stop the war right now, no holds barred, all Russia has to say is yes, then the Russians start that, well, there are a couple of details that we have to lay out before we feel comfortable stopping this and stopping the killing of Ukrainian people. Then we might consider stopping it. That's what Zelensky's done. And that, at least with the cards he's dealt with right now, is pure diplomatic genius with the kind of situation he's having to deal with at this moment.
It is diplomatic genius. The only part that does pain me, that causes me a little bit of, I guess you could say, cringeworthiness, is that all of this antics and all this genius strategizing is not to convince the West that Russia is the enemy. It's to convince one person that Russia is the enemy. And that's the part that really just pains me, because Zelensky's having to freaking do mental gymnastics to figure out how to make the situation work out good for Ukraine, not for Germany, the UK, France, any of our other allies. It's just for one person in the United States, which, in my opinion, of course, the United States has to be appeased because we're the ones who, as the people say, hold all the cards. But I hate to see Zelensky as the victim of a war having to be put through those hoops like that, considering the fact that literally everybody else is on the same page except for one person.
I would have to agree. I don't like to see it, and it's really stupid that they have to do this. But I do want to make it clear, folks, that we really can't change the cards we're dealt. We have to play the cards we're given, and considering that the Ukrainians are having to play with a pretty unfair hand of cards, it's pretty impressive to see they're going to somehow pull a win out of it in the end, most likely. Hopefully so. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that well, Susanel, at least with how everything's gone so far with the talks, and how Zelensky's actually handled this wildly well, far beyond my expectations, actually. I kind of thought the U.S. was just setting them up for an ambush and to be beat down for good, and to pretty much just, go with what they wanted. But somehow Zelensky's actually maneuvered the situation well enough to he's pretty much running how the outcome of this is going to go at this point on the American side and the Russian side, which is pretty crazy considering out of the three countries, Ukraine is the economically weakest one. So pretty wild to see that they pretty much are starting to guide the fate of how this is going to go well on into the future. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one goes to Mr. Lunchtime. We threw in a very generous $40 donation. And of course, Mr. Lunchtime is a longtime channel legend because he was around at the time when we made the Mr. Lunchtime joke, which was about a year and a half or 2 years ago. So a whopping long time ago. Is it about 2.5, you say?
Yeah, it was about 2.5, I think.
Damn, I'm getting old. But thank you very much, Mr. Lunchtime, for that $40 support. And he does say, excellent work, my friends. And take a question from the chat with Enforcer Matt reading the question Elon Musk style. Oh, I see here. I see. And we shall. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say, thank you for the massive support, Mr. Lunchtime, and thank you for being here for like 2.5 years. It's been a long time since the Mr. Lunchtime joke was a thing on this channel, but it is great to see that you're keeping old LSA traditions alive. And thank you for enjoying the excellent work. We try our best to make sure that our news is well researched, as best researched as we could, and I'm glad to know that you do enjoy it. And we will make sure to take one from the chat, and Matthew will read it in legalized comedy style. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
So we have our first question, which goes to David Tablet. He said, just a theory, but what if Russians were trying to provoke Estonia into armed conflict, just for armed incursion, without a NATO response, playing with Article 5?
Legalized warfare. Legalized warfare.
I'm a bit rusty.
But a great question, a great live chat question there. And I would say it's possible, especially considering that now we've been able to iron out that all of this did happen in international waters and not in Russian territorial waters. It does actually appear that the Russian Federation may have been attempting to provoke the Estonians into armed conflict, or may have been trying to find some justification to conduct an armed attack on the Estonians. Either way, the act of the Russians flying their aircraft into international airspace to interfere with a legal right that Estonia has is absolutely insane. Really bizarre, actually, and it is showing that the Russians are getting far more aggressive, and it also is starting to show that they are starting to have to pretty much count on their economic lifeline solely being those shadow fleet tankers, because for them to come out in such a strong form to protect that shadow tanker and to get it into Russian waters is showing us that that may be one of the last economic lifelines they have left, and it's become incredibly important and priority for them to maintain those vessels and keep them underway and making money. At least that would be my belief at the moment. But I do thank you so much for the massive support, Mr. Lunchtime, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news. And we were able to hear, folks, there is now an ongoing civil war in Libya again, as we've been able to hear that armed groups from both sides are starting to go a little crazy. We were able to see that that MRAPs from the 444th Infantry Brigade at the Old Stability Support Unit headquarters were burned by rioting crowds today. All of this is happening after the assassination of a Libyan commander in the middle of a meeting, which has pretty much sent all of the different factions in Libya once again into direct armed skirmishes with each other. Everyone's breathing in the toxic fumes from the burning MRAP. We hear some guy imitating the sound of a V8. He went, like, listen to it. I don't know what he was doing.
Roid rage.
Bro, we got Wes Watson back there. He's going off. Where's your rollie? Where's your rollie?
This is just fantastic chaos. Just pure chaos.
Absolute unmitigated chaos. Meanwhile, we then also got to see more riots breaking out in the streets of Tripoli. Many of y'all can tell the riots are getting a little bit out of control. We then also got to see, in some other news, that there are now ongoing fights by anti-governmental forces in downtown Tripoli. This is a clip of the anti-government forces, and their tactics will shock you.
Oh no, the Toyota Hilux is in reverse.
Bro.
Oh my god, those guns are huge.
Everybody gangsta until the Hilux technical with the gush guns comes rolling at you backwards, man.
I've never seen a technical with a gush gun on it. That's like one of the biggest guns I've ever seen on the back of a Hilux. Like, how the hell is that actually even supporting that weight?
I don't even know, but is that barrel burning red hot?
I think it is.
Dude, they overheated the freaking gush gun. How do you do that? Like, how much were they shooting before this video was filmed? Also, I like to note the laziness of these guys. They're not even dismounted. Literally, everyone's inside of a pickup. No one's walking. Like, they're too lazy to walk, so they're just using the trucks pretty much as infantry at this point. Look at that one!
What the hell they're even shooting at, honestly.
Bro, this one's kitted out. Look at this one.
Oh, that's nice. I like that one. It's like one of those Australian-looking ones.
Dude, this is like one of those GTA tentacles, man. That's like all like spritzed up.
Yeah, I like that. That's nice. I like the snorkel. Oh, spinning the block.
Bro, this is Chirac right here. Or this is actually Shibia.
Oh, man, off the blicky.
You see, this pickup's lost its fervor. It's now backing out.
Damn, Ahmad, don't pull out the 9.
We almost saw a collision happen up there. The camera panned away right before it happened. And also,
so this is what they sung about in the Army songs when they said the shores of Tripoli. This is what it looked like.
Actually, that's the Marine Corps song, man. If someone's going to come in here triggered over that, you said the Army song. Like, he's like, no.
Whatever. Y'all know what I mean. Anyways, the shores of Tripoli, they're looking a little chaotic and a little bit crazy.
Dude, man, the Marines say, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. And then everyone's like, what happened to Tripoli? And then they show that video. But we also got to see a T-72 from the 444th Brigade running over a car and then firing its gun. This is a scene out of GTA, actually. I'm just going to show y'all the clip. We see the tank coming on in, running over the car, and then firing the gun, which knocked the camera over. It's straight up GTA in the streets of Tripoli at the moment, folks. I don't know what's going on out there. We actually don't even know where the active front lines between the two factions are. It's literally just absolute insanity breaking out throughout the city. So, at this moment, the really only major city in Tripoli outside of Benghazi, which everyone knows because of a certain thing that happened like about 10 years ago at this point. But outside of Tripoli, it appears that the entire country is now embroiled in civil war. And we will be trying to see if we can get any news on that as time passes by. But moving on from that, we also got to hear of another armed uprising that's happening in Pakistan, as we were able to hear that apparently Balochistan is declaring independence. This entire area in red is Balochistan, and it's a pretty significant area in landmass, but it actually doesn't have that many people living in it. It's a pretty sparsely populated desert arid region of Pakistan, but from what we've been able to hear, They have apparently declared independence and are asking for the Indians to recognize Balochistan as an actual independent sovereign nation from Pakistan. We can actually see a video that they put out today showing the flag of Balochistan as they are now going into direct armed rebellion against the Pakistani government. We then were also able to see today that they did conduct a major armed attack on Pakistani forces that were patrolling through the area. We actually don't get to show that clip, it was deleted, but it was a pretty interesting one because it appears that an entire convoy of the Pakistani army was wiped out in the ambush. Moving on out of that, however, we were also able to see that Saudi Arabia is now conducting airstrikes on the Houthis. Here are the Houthis. This is through a Saudi Arabian camera, and the airstrike got them. Look at that. I guess there will be no more Houthis. Man, really sad.
The Houthis and the blown up fish.
Man, the Houthi and the missile. It's like a children's book nearly. We also got to hear that Iran stated that they are not going to be submitting to U.S. blackmail. We will not submit to any blackmail. Once again, the talks are falling apart, folks. Do y'all notice the running theme that they make, like, no progress, and then the talks fall apart, and then it all restarts again? Well, should we just get to bombing them? Vote for me for president. We're going to get to dealing with the Iranians once and for all, making sure they don't have those nuclear weapons. Anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to hear that France is now stating that all Caesar SPGs produced in France in 2025 will be transferred to Ukraine. And that was a direct statement from the president of France, Macron, today. Meanwhile, moving on into Ukraine, we were able to hear the air defense report, as we were able to hear that 145 drones were launched, along with an Iskander. 80 drones were shot down, 42 were suppressed, and the remaining drones and the Iskander did make it to their targets and did end up hitting them. Meanwhile, near to the area of Rilisk, we have been able to hear that the headquarters of the Russian Federation that was destroyed in this area apparently was housing the deputy commander of the 40th Marine Corps in Rilisk. And this guy right here, he's dead. He's been killed in that airstrike. Very unfortunate for the Russians that another higher-up commander like that ended up getting killed. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians did hit a major bridge near to the town of Zvano today, which we could see in this clip right here as the Ukrainians play the heavy metal. And they're about to hit that bridge with the heavy metal. And we can see the airstrike being conducted right here. Look at that. Hitting it hard. Knocking it out.
They're smashing them.
Smashing, governor. And the airstrikes are hitting everything.
Oh, deer.
Man, that's what a hunter with a bad stutter says when he's out hunting during deer season. He goes, "Oh, did it deer."
It's a stammer, Jack.
I have a stammer. Grease the bitch. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our next clip. We also got to see further on down the lines in the area near to Sucha that the Russian forces were getting hit by artillery from the 47th Magura. We see the Russians have built a significant little trench works in this area, but that won't save them from the Ukrainian barrage that's soon to come. And here it comes. First, they hit the Russians' satellite connection for television. Second, they hit their internet access. Third, they hit their radios. Fourth, they hit more internet access. The Russians are in a panic. They're running in big groups, not conducting any kind of spacing whatsoever. And we all know that that's a fatal mistake here.
The Ukrainians were also looking to hit their intelligence, but unfortunately they couldn't ever locate it.
Oh, dude, someone just said it, man. Bro's talking like Jimmy from South Park. Isn't that the one who was like, man, we're going to go and cap some punk-ass... It's like just something like that. It's like, bro, it's like... Yeah, man, that was a funny one, actually. I saw that one. Like, I've never watched South Park in its entirety, but I did see that in the clip, and that was actually pretty hilarious. Anyways, we can see the Ukrainians continuing to conduct precise artillery strikes onto this base, and it does appear that significant damage is resulting to key parts of the installation. Well, that's the end of that clip. And that's great to see the 47 Magura doing its job. Meanwhile, moving on down and into the area of Belgrade, we also got to see the 225th Assault Regiment also operating within the Belgrade region. This is near to Grafovka. Oh, it sounds like there might be music in the background, but we can hear a firefights now starting. The Ukrainians are getting ready to post up behind the trees for cover. We now see them moving on. Also a weird transition right there. You see a Ukrainian Max Pro messing with a tree. We can now see them driving down the road. We can also see them bringing in a supply truck past a knocked out main battle tank. Not really sure if that actually appeared to have been Russian. Yeah, it was Russian. Wait, hang on. Actually, that may have been Ukrainian. That actually looks like it may be a white triangle. We now see them trying to recover the tank, and it actually is a Ukrainian tank. They're trying to recover it. We see them mounting the tow hooks onto the truck. They're getting ready to pull this thing out. Oh, dude, look at that. They had a little collection in there. Hey, look at that.
Oh.
An AK-74, I think. Yeah, an AK-74 and an M4 carbine. Nice.
Oh, the M4 carbine, a classic.
Man, a mix of Eugene Stoner's brilliance and Kalashnikov's rugged utilitarian rifles. Very, very nice mix to see in the cab of that truck right there. And also, Matthew, the answer to that's no. I didn't include that one tonight. So we will find a way to straddle that one in. Oh, look at those ATVs. Oh, look at those ATVs. Look at them. They're nice. I like that. We love to see it. We also see them recovering an M113 as well. And that's the end of that clip. Very nice to see. And I actually have one that Matthew wanted to include tonight. We were able to hear that Germany is rearming and and apparently rebuilding its army to be the strongest army in Europe. And is this concerning? And it seems as though a lot of people are saying, no, it's a great move by Germany. Others are saying, somewhat, but it's understandable. And others are saying, yes, it's concerning to me. Geschickt verleiten eine Deutschen Vote. But beyond that, Matthew, what are people thinking about this? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So now that Germany has announced it's rebuilding its army rapidly to be the strongest army in Europe, is this concerning? So 65% said no, it's a great move by Germany, while 17% said somewhat, but understandable, and 13% said yes, it's a bit concerning to me. And, on this one, I'm a little bit on the fence. I'm not going to be having to lie on this. I'm going to have to be honest on this one. I'm a little bit on the fence. Germany has been rebuilding its military since they were disarmed after World War II, or they went through World War II, and they've been rebuilding ever since. So they've been doing that gradually, but now they're having a rapid rearmament that was just announced by the brand new leader of Germany that just took office. So to me, that's slightly concerning. Here's why. Because the pre-World War I, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany rapidly expanded its navy and its army under the guise of competing with Britain and France. And then World War I broke out. Meanwhile, World War II, we know who came to power then in Germany. They rapidly, aggressively rearmed Germany. They violated a treaty by doing that, and then World War II happened. I'm not saying that Germany's going to start World War III, but Germany, when it comes to their track record of that, it's a little bit on shaky ground, in my opinion. And once again, if you are German and you're in the chat, I'm not dissing on your country. I'm just saying that sometimes the leadership there seems to get a bit carried away when the army gets big. So I like the fact that they're rearming, but the rapid rearmament is a little slightly concerning to me. So I'm actually with the 17%. It's understandable, but I'm a little bit leery. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say, long time coming. Where have they been? Also, by the way, Matthew, the German army was actually massive during the Cold War. It was about 500,000 strong at any given moment. Nowadays, it's only about 180, and that was according to 2018. So they are actually a shadow of their former selves, even by 1991 standards, just in West Germany alone, not including East Germany, because this is the entire Bundeswehr, which is the whole of the German army. The Heer, the Luftwaffe, the I don't believe it's called the Kriegsmarine anymore. I think it's something else. But it's all the branches combined. They were about 500,000 strong, which is quite significant by modern standards. I think that'd be bigger than the Polish army. But considering that they're rearming and they're going to be probably getting up back to that size, I'd say it's fine. They already had a far larger army after World War II for decades and didn't do anything crazy. And considering that Germany is a pretty neat country now that generally, it doesn't really align with the whole, idea of my struggle. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be good. And anyways, Matthew, who's better at fighting the war than the Germans? And this time they're on our side. I mean, who could want something better than that? You know, it's a great thing. I welcome them into the fold. I think the Germans will make a great addition to our collection.
I of course, I love Germany. I've studied Germany for a long time. The only thing I will say is this. The only thing that has me slightly concerned is it's a brand new leader. And once he took office, he's immediately like, let's rearm it to the biggest military ever. It's like, it's like, the track record of that. Like, there's nothing wrong with rearming the military or trying to beef it up because, of course, there's a lot of threats globally. But the fact it's a new leader that said that just came in, that's the part that gets me a little bit worried to a certain extent. But the worry is not like major. I would say my worry is probably like, 20% out of 100% worried, I would say. So it's a minor worry, but there is a little bit in the back of my head that's like, you got to always like kind of watch out for that kind of thing with a new leader.
Oh, come on, man. They had to start somewhere, right? I mean, they had to remilitarize somewhere. I mean, as long as they don't remilitarize the Rhineland and start talking about getting some Lebensraum, I think we'll be fine. And considering that they like the Polish these days, I don't think they'll be wanting that. Because, it'd be weird for Germany to go, we want the Lebensraum, and then, go straight to Russia, because it's like they have to get through Poland, Belarus, the Baltics, and Ukraine first. I think they'll be fine. And also, they did have a bigger military in the past. So, putting that into the equation, and they had a bigger military in the past during the Cold War. So putting that in mind, I think they'll be fine. I think it's a great thing, honestly. And I would highly encourage that every single European country should rearm. I think the French should, the British should, and the Germans should. Hell, I think each one of them ought to be able to field an army in the hundreds of thousands at all times. It would be impressive, and it really would show that the West really isn't to be trifled with, because hell, if you just put two countries together in Europe with those kinds of figures, like France and Germany with about 500,000 to 600,000 troops in each, they actually end up having an armed force, just the two of those countries, the size of the U.S. military. So I think if we saw that across every country in Europe, that'd actually be quite impressive.
Also, by the way, Sokolov812 said in the live chat, the Germans are much different people than they were back then. I'm not making a comment on the German people. Like, historically speaking, from what I can tell, every time something has gone sideways with Germany and their leadership and military, it's been from the top. It's not been from like the people demanding that they do something bad. It's generally the new leadership that takes charge and then convinces a decent portion of the people that they should go along with something that's bad. It's not all the people in Germany. I want to make that clear right off the bat. Whenever there's a like, for example, Russia, they're conducting atrocities in Ukraine. Not everybody in Russia supports that. The same thing for Germany. Not everybody supported the atrocities of the past either. It's just the people that are in charge that recently just took power that I don't know much about. And I'm going to have to learn more about the new leadership in Germany to figure out where they're coming from. But that's the part that concerns me, is who's taking charge, and why all of a sudden are they wanting to remilitarize so rapidly, considering the past. So that's the part I'm worried about.
Well, it's probably because Russia might be going to war with NATO. That might be the big reason why they're rearming like everyone else is right now in Europe. But it's not really like, it's like, is Macron like trying to reinvigorate the French Empire and take over all of Europe in the visage of Napoleon? It's like, no, it's like the Russians might be going to war with NATO, so everyone wants to be ready instead of call lacking. And considering that the German army throughout the whole Cold War was 500,000 strong, and they're now around 170,000 strong, rebuilding back at the 500,000 is nothing concerning, because, the argument that you might be trying to make right now, we could have made about any West German president or chancellor throughout all of the Cold War. Are they trying to bring back Nazi Germany with an army that big? And they didn't. And I think there's a very good justification these days, but it's not like Germany's doing that in a vacuum. They're doing it in response to the Russians going to war in Ukraine and then saying that they're going to expand even further westwards into Eastern Europe.
Right. But the catch is in the language itself that was used. The strongest army in Europe, indicating a sense of superiority to other European countries. Why they need to be the strongest one in Europe? That's my question. That's the part that got me a little bit like some red flags going up. Why are they simply not saying that they want to rebuild their military to be strong enough to defend the alliance? Why are they making a point to emphasize that they want to be the single largest military of the European countries? That's the part that kind of has an air of like superiority to it that kind of caught my attention.
Well, I mean, yeah, but, we say we want the best planes in the world, we're not trying to, take it over or anything,
Honestly, we're
like,
the world police, man. We have to have the best. We have to know. We're the United States.
you're the United States. We have to know.
We have to know.
And guess what? I found your album, Hell Columbia. Isn't that great? Oh no, on God, he slid. He found my first anthem, on God. And I'm sure that you said that your first bird was going to be the turkey? No way, bro. He slid, on God. Oh my God. Like, it's like, imagine Nardwar interviewing the United States of America. That would be something to watch. Anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on from that poll and on into the remainder of our news, as we do have some more interesting news coming abound. As we were able to see, this Ukrainian cat, we haven't had like a comedic relief kind of a thing in a bit. This isn't really comedic relief, it's just something cute. But I thought I'd show you all this Ukrainian cat. It's a very cute cat, and it's fluffy. I'm allergic to cats, but, still, I think they're really cute, Look at it.
Look at that.
Baby kid.
Having a great time.
Toot toot toot.
Two cats, Macho Man.
I did the whole doot 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 thing, and I got no response. I
don't know nothing about that, but I do know about this cat right here. Look at it. Oh, that's insane. Look at that.
Look at it. They're petting cat. The cat plays with rat toy. The cat gets blanket. We see Ukrainian soldiers looking at cat. We can see more cats. We can see this cat eating eyeball. We see it is actually kitten, small kitten. We can see the Ukrainian soldier continuing to talk about small cat. And we see cat again. Ukrainian soldiers are happy, for cats are cute. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Rudniks section, as the Russian engineers are taking out the destroyed cars at this point and trying to turn them into something again. Listen to the sounds of victory.
Oh, a lowrider with the velvet seats.
Man, this is what we're working on. We're trying to make something out of something, блядь.
Чтобы раненых вывозить. Сейчас будем из 3 москвичей 1 собирать.
I don't know what he's talking about. I don't really think you can make anything out of that, but they're going to try. Anyways, moving on from that abomination, we also got to see a Japanese Type 73 in Ukraine. Now, that's pretty cool. These are actually primarily used by the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force, as well as other armed forces of the state of Japan. We can actually see one right here. And these have been provided in limited numbers by the state of Japan to Ukraine in the past. And it appears that the Ukrainians have been putting them to use, although we've never really heard about them much. Still wanted to show it off because Japanese military support is quite small in number and fairly rare to see in picture form. So seeing this is actually really unique, rare, and cool. But moving on from that, it's now time for us to get to the Russian casualty report, as we were able to hear of significant losses. Oh!
0 Bobcat skid steers, but the other losses are honestly kind of crazy if you look at it in its totality. But tell us more.
And we got some amazing news from Miss Disha, keeper of the records, that stated an average loss day with most categories near the 7-day averages. Tanks in low single digits for the past week, while vehicles continue to be consistently high. Anti-aircraft totals in 10 in the last 7 days. And we were able to get the entirety of the number here across the board, as 1,240 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 14 armored personnel carriers, 126 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 47 artillery pieces, 82 drones, 1 MLRS, and 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems. All in all, it was a pretty impressive day, and it was great to see that the Russian Federation continues to take significant losses. Moving on from that and further down the line and into the area of the Severonsky Forest, we were able to see fighting in the woods.
Up here.
2 times.
Yeah. Dennis Codal, here.
Dennis Codal.
Yeah, straight down, okay?
Toss the nade and put shrimp on the barbie, eh?
Covering fire. Go.
And we see him firing the grenade launcher.
Good, yes. That's where it was.
And we see him reloading, but that was a little bit of a clip from the fight in the Sibiransky forest that is still going on. Meanwhile, we also get to see the Ukrainians shooting down an Su-25. They shot it down with a Piorin. And there goes the missile.
Give him the gyro special.
О, есть, черный дым. Прием.
They got it.
Пуск, азимут 100, дальність десь біля 3. Чорний дим наблюдаю. Су-25, крило, одне. Блядь. Welcome to Ukraine.
Oh, that's the end of the clip. Nice to see, though. They did shoot down an Su-25. Meanwhile, in Turretsk, we once again got to see the work of the Petardie crews, as it appears they're continuing to throw giant bombs into Russian positions and quite literally level them into Sendas.
Welcome to Ukraine, bitches.
Welcome to Ukraine, Soki.
He must be very cold. Give him some winter gear.
I'm not cold, bitch. I have a stammer. Bleed. Soka. But you see them backing off after they threw the bomb in. Here in a second, we'll see the whole building go up. As one does with massive anti-tank charges being thrown into a building. And take a look, folks. The charge is about to go, and there it goes. The whole building is gone. And that's the end of the clip right there, but very nice to see, and we love to know that they were able to knock out another Russian position. Moving on from that and further down the line, we also get to see the Ukrainians taking out some Russian drones here in the next area. Take a look. Also, someone said the stutter is too real. Funnily enough, I don't know how. I actually was developing a stutter years ago in high school, and I still have it. It's actually a little light, and every once in a while, y'all might be able to hear it come out on stream. But it's not very bad, and somehow I was able to just work my way out of it, which is a little bit interesting. Nevertheless, they did take out Russian drones. Very nice to see, and good to know they were taking them down. Meanwhile, near Novoselivka parachute, we also get to see the anti-drone activities continuing, as they continue to take down more Lancets. Take a look, it's a Russian Lancet flying over the fields, and then it got blown away at the field. We now see them hitting another one. Oh, they took it out, don't believe it. And here comes another one, another Lancet. It is gone. Oh, and that is the end of the clip. They had made sure to take care of them. Welcome to Ukraine. And moving on from that and into the next clip, we also get the Ukrainians hitting Aussie system. Look, Aussie hit right there. And then it went out of control. And we now see them hitting Russian building, where Russians had quite nicely. And continuing to slam more Russians. You see them continuing to hit more of these people.
Nicholas Condor said, "Enforcer, you're in good company." Winston Churchill also had speaking issues. Yeah, he also had a bottle problem too. He was hitting the sauce on a regular basis. You know, I think that might have been the source of his speaking issue.
He's a devil for the drink, Kathleen. He's a devil for the drink.
He's just flamboyant, Kathleen. He's just flamboyant.
Oh, you know, Kathleen. He's a real character, Kathleen. But anyway, we also get to see the Russians getting hit here by the 110th Mechanized Brigade. Cooking him.
He's just a devil for the drink. That's all. Just a devil. He's a character, Kathleen. Just a character.
I see a lot of people actually getting a kick out of the stuttering. I'm not going to do it too much because when you do something like that, you can actually make that a habit of your speech pattern. So I got to do that one very intermittently, even if people really do enjoy it, because I don't really want to Pavlov myself pretty much into having an actual stutter. Because crazily enough, if you actually attempt to stutter and you start doing it a lot, you can actually develop a real stutter out of that. At least from what I've heard from voice experts or linguistic experts.
Yeah, I think stutters are almost entirely psychological. Like, there's really no real cause to it except for just something in your brain.
Yeah, it's kind of like a tic, a lot like someone would have with Tourette's. It's kind of a similar thing, in which both of them are involuntary, but somehow they're both psychological for the large part. But there's really no way to reverse them once you get them. So that's an interesting kind of a thing.
Also, by the way, like to the Germans in the chat, I see like 2 Germans that got very upset with my comments earlier. I don't mean to offend you in Germany. I will say this, though. I have seen Germans express concern about the United States and the direction we're taking with foreign policy. And I actually take those and I say, okay, fair game. That's fair enough. I just deal in an objective sense. Like, yeah, y'all have to admit, like, even though some people might not agree with my comments, there is like a factual basis for it, even though you may disagree. So, I mean, it's just kind of just being, I guess you could say, honest in my opinion, but also not going too far overboard with it. So hopefully I didn't offend too many Germans out there.
And of course I say welcome to the armed forces of NATO. You know, I built that thing up to be the biggest in Europe. Please go ahead. I like to see it. Honestly, I think it'd be kind of cool, you know, to see like a modern German army the size it was in the Cold War. That'd be pretty goated, honestly. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see a Tor system being destroyed near to the area of Kakhovka in Kherson region. That thing is cooked.
You know, the one telltale sign I will know that something's gone desperately wrong with Germany's rearmament?
What?
If those long hooded Mercedes come back.
Oh no. Oh no.
We want short hood Mercs. We don't want long hood ones.
And you see here the Tor is cooking up. And also, I just saw someone say, there's kind of an issue with Germany rearming when they're deleting political parties. But the thing is, though, is that that specific political party was akin in Germany to getting as close as it could to being a Nazi party, like not getting political on the German side, but, you know, it was extremely far right, which usually is considered to be getting towards the fascist path, while going extremely far left is getting towards communism. So, you know, if like you're banning a political party that is starting to move further and further, possibly towards some form of fascism, it's like, that's kind of a hard argument to make, you know, because it's not really like, you know, Hitler's going through and saying, you know, let's start putting gold stars on the Jewish people's clothes. You know, it's more like, let's, you know, possibly try and curb this extreme party that might be going down a pretty bad path. Because I don't know if y'all know this, but anything that is associated with Nazism, even in a remote way, is illegal in Germany. And it's been a part of their constitutional law since the Federal German Republic became a thing in the modern day. But we can see here the Tor has toasted nicely. I mean, it's toasted so nicely, actually, the entire center of the turret is gone.
Also, by the way, Paul Campbell said, Matt, the long hooded Mercedes were the SL class. You're right, but they actually extended them. Like, they actually, the people in power at the time actually had those, like, actually custom extended, so they'd look more menacing for propaganda photos.
And also, I see some people getting into the political thing. I'll be honest with y'all, folks. I'm just going to tell y'all honestly, the way I think government most efficiently functions is if you have a slightly left and a slightly right-leaning political party, and, you know, if you have a two-party system, and that's it. When both sides start getting into the extremes, going far left and far right, it does no good for anyone. And also, the policies that come out are absolutely absurd. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. And that's also weather. Well, the system blew up. Kakhovka. Anyways, moving on from that, and on out of the clip, it's time for us to move on up to Kyiv to cover a speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 1176 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. Speech!
Дорогі українці і українки, коротко про сьогодні. Я хочу подякувати нашим захисникам неба за захист від шахедів, від усіх інших ударних дронів. Більше сотні шахедів було в ніч на цей день. Значну кількість збито. Не всі, але кожне збиття зберігає наших людей, зберігає нашу інфраструктуру. Були ракети сьогодні, російська балістика. Коли увесь світ чекає від Путіна простої відповіді «так», на пропозицію прямих перемовин, він продовжує бити по Україні. Жодного військового сенсу в цьому немає. Це зрозуміло. Нічого йому це не дає і не дасть. Росія тільки затягує війну. Затягує. ці вбивства, і кожна країна, кожен лідер, які зараз тиснуть на Росію, заради того, щоб все ж припинився вогонь, щоб все ж були нормальні, змістовні перемовини на рівні, який дозволяє ухвалити рішення кожному, хто допомагає миру, допомагає дипломатії. Я хочу дякувати. Сьогодні була дуже важлива заява Папи Римського Лева XIV про готовність Ватикану до посередницької роботи. Ватикан може допомогти дипломатії. Є підтримка прямої зустрічі від лідерів країн глобального півдня. І цей голос звучить. Знаємо також позицію Китаю щодо припинення вогню і перемовин. Абсолютно чітка позиція Америки і Європи. Фактично, зараз найбільш очевидно для всіх у світі, за весь час повномасштабної війни очевидно, що єдиною перепоною для встановлення миру є відсутність чіткої волі Росії це зробити. Сьогодні ми провели кілька нарад з командою щодо формату в Туреччині. Я очікую, хто прибуде від Росії, тоді буду визначати, які кроки варто робити Україні. Сигнали від них у медіа поки непереконливі. Але ми чуємо також, що президент Трамп розглядає можливість бути в Туреччині. Тож це може стати найбільш сильним аргументом. Тиждень дійсно може змінити багато, але може. Зараз все це вирішується. І я хочу відзначити наших воїнів. Це дуже важливо в цей час. Були доповіді сьогодні головкома Сирського по ситуації на фронті, на усіх напрямках. Щодобово більше сотні боїв, особливо важкі. Покровський напрямок, інші напрямки на Донеччині. Ми продовжуємо наші активні дії на Курщині та у Білгородській області. Ми захищаємо превентивно українське прикордоння. Але всі бойові дії – це не наш вибір, це наша оборона. Оборона проти окупанта. Відповіді на всі питання про цю війну. Чому вона почалась? Чому вона триває? Всі ці відповіді в Москві. Як війна закінчиться, залежить від світу. Україна готова до будь-яких форматів перемовин, і ми не боїмося зустрічі. Завтра в Туреччині. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1176 of the news from around the world. And that is going to be moving us on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, do we love to get to talk to each and every one of y'all. We have loads to chit-chat about, and the news was quite long tonight. It took about 2 hours and 5 minutes to get through the whole thing from beginning to end. But we are entirely honored and appreciative of having all of y'all here. And not only that, I gotta say, one of you out there was able to get that 355,000 subscriber label, as we did pass 355,000 subscribers tonight, and we're now sitting at a comfortable 355,020. So, very nice to see that 70 subscribers have joined us here on the stream tonight. A massive thanks to y'all once again. And of course, without further ado and delay, I believe that it is time for us to talk about what the world is going to look like in a year. And where do you see yourself in the world in 1 year? And a lot of people are saying widespread regional wars. Some are saying World War III will begin. Others are saying status quo continues, nothing will change. And some people are saying peace begins taking hold and the world returns back to the weird state it finds itself in, where there's generally peace lasting over most of the world. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
And this poll question says, where do you see the world in 1 year? It truly is like one of those personal development questions they ask you in school where it's like, where will you be in 5 years? Write it down and how you're going to get there. And I said, law school. I'll be a lawyer. I'll be practicing law in a courtroom. And guess what? I'm not in a courtroom. I'm here speaking to 8,000 people on a political science stream of all things. And not where I was expecting to be, but I'm much happier here than there. So it turned out for the better. But just to show you that these predictions are not always accurate. But what do you think? So about 43% said widespread regional wars in about a year, while 23% said World War III begins, 12% said peace begins taking hold, and 23% says status quo continues, no change. And I would say, generally speaking, I am with the 43%. I think widespread regional wars, which we're already really seeing right now, are going to continue spreading. And typically, that is the breeding ground for a world war to break out. So we are seeing that right now, and it appears to be only escalating. There's no de-escalation pretty much anywhere in the world right now, and there's new conflicts popping up literally daily. Now there's one in Libya, there's one in India, Pakistan. They're popping up all over the place. It seems to be never ending. So that's a big red flag. That's a warning sign that we are leading up to something larger. And maybe it'll be World War III, but not in a year, in my opinion. I think we're going to see more regional wars breaking out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'd be with the 42%. I think there's going to be more widespread regional wars going on around the world. And hopefully we will not see that there's any kind of a major world war that breaks out in a year. I still think that's unlikely. And I think we're just going to continue to see more regional wars breaking out at this point. So I hope that has addressed that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on into the questions themselves. And Matthew, I understand that we have quite a many of them. So please take it away.
All right, so jumping into our Super Chat segment, our last one here, this one goes to none other than Activista, who's a longtime channel legend as well. And thank you very much, Activista, for the $50 support. That's very generous of you. And Activista said, Tom Exman kindly reminded me that quality journalism costs actual dollars. Thank you, from Activista.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Activista, who is an old guard and a channel legend, mind everyone, and also a massive supporter of the Sunday Night Fundraisers. And I got to thank you massively, Activista, for supporting this channel directly and helping us to keep it running, because no one has to support the channel, but it is largely true. Journalism like this exists on cold, hard cash, because behind the scenes here are two people, folks. Two people, Matthew and me. We run the whole channel, top to bottom. Everything that happens on this channel, it goes through our grubby little hands, and there's absolutely nothing that is done by third parties except for the intro, which was still done by me. I was the one overseeing it, but I do have to give a massive shout out to Marcos Baralari, who is the composer, and also Budapest Scoring, which did all of the actual orchestrating of our scores. And also, by the way, I have to give out the bragging right. I didn't know this at the time, but Budapest Scoring is actually the same orchestra that did the soundtrack for Squid Game, and also I think Die Hard as well. So if you've ever seen either of those series, we actually had the same orchestra do our intro that did those movie soundtracks. So that's actually pretty neat. But beyond that, I do have to say, thank you massively for your support, because like I was saying, your support helps us, the two people behind the scenes, to be able to live. Living ain't free, folks. And, you know, the days of indentured servitude where people work for free, it is over. So we actually do have to pay bills, and we have to keep lights on. And folks like you, Activista, who do support this channel, help us be able to pay those bills and eat by doing this. And that means that we are able to dedicate all of our time, every waking day, for about 70 to 60 hours a week, onto this channel, each of us individually. And if it wasn't for folks like you, Activista, we wouldn't have been able to make this thing possible for 1,176 days, and we wouldn't be able to make it possible for another 1,176 days, hopefully. So with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Activista, and thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping this thing to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, but a huge thanks once again.
Oh, yes, indeed. And our next one here is going to go to another channel legend. This is Marion Deemert, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, for that 50. And we do appreciate that very much. And Marion said, keep on chiving on an LSA.
Hey, and keep chiving on, baby. And I got to say, chive, isn't that stuff that you put on the potato? You get the potato with chives, you know? Yes. Chives. They're here. And they're also these really cool looking little flowering plants. Look at that, Matthew. Look at that.
Oh, yes. Look at that. That's a chive right there. They said, let's put that on potato and let's make it better.
Man, dude, Irish people look at this and they see seasoning. They're like, wow. And honestly, I see seasoning as well. Chive on potatoes is actually pretty good, I would say. And I got to say, thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer, and thank you for encouraging us to keep on chiving on. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep chiving on. We simply wouldn't. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to have all the potatoes that we've had in the middle of running the show, which has actually been quite a decent amount. Quite a large amount of potatoes, mind you, folks. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep chiving on. So a huge, massive thank you to you. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But I cannot move on without saying that Marion Deemer, much like Activista, and David Dornblasser, all channel legends and old guards to boot. I've been with the channel pretty much since its very early days covering the news on Ukraine, and now y'all have watched the channel evolve into this amazing, incredible channel that covers news from quite literally around the globe. Y'all wouldn't believe it, folks. But in a roundabout way, the exact reason I joined, I got on YouTube actually came into being. Because when I first got onto YouTube, I will actually show you all this because this is a little trip down memory lane for some of you. Let me go back to the first videos I ever made on the channel. If we go back and look at these, you can actually see the first videos ever made on the channel were actually news videos, which is actually pretty crazy. The first one actually got demonetized. Apparently had copyrighted audio in it. Folks, I didn't say I was ever perfect. But you know what's crazy? It actually got 1,000 views. And this thing actually has been made public again. So you can actually see both these videos. And then these are the gaming channel videos for the large part that were made private. Y'all can't see those, and they honestly were bad quality. But beyond that, the channel actually did start... Go ahead.
The Poppy Playtime Murder Toys are chasing me. What the hell kind of games are you playing?
Dude, actually, that's a goated game, honestly. That's actually a really good game. Some people might know about it. It was a big thing back when that video was made, actually. Like, it just came out. Which is kind of crazy, because that game is actually a well-founded franchise at this point. That has had, like, I think 3 other games come out after the first one. But anyways, I was around playing that when it first came out, folks, and it was actually pretty damn good. But beyond that, I was playing everything. I was playing Tarkov, War Thunder. Some of these, one of these videos actually did insanely good. Oh yeah, like my dog fighting tips and tricks video actually got 3,000 views, which blew me away at the time. It's private now, so no one can actually touch it and look at it. But these videos were the first, and the channel actually was created as a world news channel. And then it failed badly, because when these videos actually went out, I think in the first month, both of them only got about 120 or 130 views, which isn't a lot, but considering that I only had, I think, 9 subscribers at the time, that was actually insanely good. Like, I was getting way more views than I had subscribers. And I wish that I had just kept on doing world news, but I got burnt out pretty quick because these videos took a lot of time to put together. And so then I gave up. And so then eventually the Ukraine war started. We started covering Ukraine war news. And then slowly, yet surely, we've actually been able to evolve this into the channel I originally envisioned, which was a world news channel. I never expected that we would run live streams doing it, though. I thought it was going to be videos only. So there has been things that were completely unexpected, like, you know, running streams every night. Did not ever think we would be doing that. But somehow we actually have, we get in the top 100 every single night, pretty much, for running one of the largest streams in the United States on YouTube, doing this news every night on air. So it's actually a really crazy thing to think that folks like you, Marion Deemer, have been around pretty much since those very opening days of the war, which I think should be, actually they're live streams, but they should have been down here somewhere. Let's see here. It would have been... Actually, these videos are old, dude. Look at this. April 26th of 2022. Remember, dude, this was when I was making the wildly short, like, little clips of just little things that would happen in the war.
Man, what's crazy is this, is I actually had a YouTube, I actually had, I think, the first YouTube channel between the two of us, and I made the motorcycle videos. I had one video that got like 300,000 views or something, and even by like our modern day channel standards, that was pretty large, even for our current channel, which is now pretty large. My original channel had like 1,000 subscribers or something like that on it. It's no longer around, though. If you're going to try to go look for it, it's no longer in existence, so it's not out there. I have one video on my Enforcer Matt channel that I used to chat here in the chat. But yeah, I had one 300,000 view video, and I thought I'd like made it big after that. I was like, oh wow, this is going crazy. But then I realized, dang, there's really not much content to make when you just ride one motorcycle. You have to go around trying to find other motorcycles to ride to make videos about them. So then from there, it kind of like fell off. I was like, I really don't know where to take it. And also, I was young. I was still in like grade school, and I was like, whatever. I'm just going to let it go. But honestly, though, I should have ran with that too back in the day. But anyways, I didn't, and we ended up here, so it's much better.
Man, actually, Matthew, I think I beat you, man, because remember I made the YouTube channel, and it's Lost Enforcer content. It was before I ever even was the Enforcer. And you remember it, Matthew? I built the entirety of the Washington National Mall on Minecraft in a 1-to-1 scale. And I made a video giving a tour of it for, I think, a 6th grade like map project or something like that. And that was way back, I think, in like 2014. So I think that actually predated everything that we ever made, and it was uploaded to YouTube. And then I think we deleted it because I said it was cringe. And honestly, I really regret deleting it because we lost that map actually a while later. And Matthew did get to see it back in the day. We actually were running a Minecraft server at the time when I was like really, really young. And it had a 1-to-1 scale Capitol building on it. Every single one of the Smithsonians had been built to full scale, along with the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial and the White House, and everything else had been properly spaced and built. So everything was actually the proper dimension and distance from each other. So it actually was pretty cool. It took a lot of time to make. Like, I remember the Capitol building itself, which had no interior, mind you. It was just literally the shell. It took 3 solid days to build the whole thing, and also the grounds surrounding it. So that took an insanely long amount of time. But I did remember I built the Capitol's Visitor Center below it, right here. Don't you remember that, Matthew? Like, you walked down the stairs, and then you ended up underground in the Visitor Center below the Capitol.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the whole thing vividly because it had like all the rooms and stuff in the bottom of it and everything.
Yeah, man. Dude, I hate that that map was lost, and I hate that the video was lost because it's the only proof that we had that that map existed. But it's all been lost to history at this point, which is a damn shame, really. But beyond that, I think that was the first bit of YouTube content that either of us put out was that, and it was literally just for a school project. So a little bit crazy with that. I wish we had that, man, because I know that a lot of y'all would just die to see it these days, and I wish we had it around. Because it actually wasn't bad. I just literally went around and like explained a little bit about each building, and I was such a little squeaker then. Like, my voice was totally different. I sounded really quiet. It was a totally different kind of a video than y'all would ever see today. It was the first thing that either of us, I think, did on YouTube. But still, I hate that we don't have that. But beyond that, folks like you, Marion Deemer, have helped us to get here all the way to today. And I got to thank you so much for once again supporting this channel tonight and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make it possible and keep it rolling. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, we need to address a poll that's currently running right now. And it says China claims it has a hypersonic space weapon, which it just announced. They can strike anywhere in the world in like 30 minutes or some crazy small amount like that. And what are your thoughts? So 60% said the USA likely has a similar system, while 18% said sounds like China has an edge, and 8% said, chat, we're cooked. And just to give you some more information about it, it's Chinese military researchers claiming that they now have a hypersonic missile system that can be launched from space using reentry glide vehicles known as RGVs, and it's capable of reaching speeds of Mach 20, which is around 13,000 miles per hour, and it can strike any target in the world in under 30 minutes, and it's very hard to intercept, if not impossible to intercept, based on what they're claiming. So that is something right there, which is fascinating. We did know that China was working on hypersonic weapons, but we didn't hear they were going to be launched from space. That's another new aspect to it, which we did not hear before. So if you believe it, it sounds like they have a system that, at least publicly, the USA does not have a system to match it, unless we decide to announce something that we have been keeping classified for a while. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I probably believe that's a bit of a propaganda stretch because the Chinese kind of have a way of doing that a lot. But still, if that does exist and we are able to confirm that, that is a little bit concerning. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But still, very interesting to hear. And I'd have to agree, we probably have a similar system out there somewhere. But once again, we also have other kinds of systems that China doesn't really have, like working aircraft carriers that are able to, one of our aircraft carriers is able to carry the same amount of aircraft as all 3 of their aircraft carriers combined. So I would say that we have some different abilities that give us a bit of an upper hand in some instances. But still, I hope that is addressed the best I can. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
Also, India just called and said that they think that the Chinese hypersonic rods from God might be more superior to theirs because they're losing. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Grr Call, who puts in a $15 donation. And thank you very much, Grr, for that support. It said, you need to use coordinates with north and east added, and this brings you to the Gulf of Finland.
And I thank you for the support. And we would do that, but I'm not really good with coordinates. I'm really good with eyeballing it, kind of like some gun companies out there. They do their tolerances by eyeballing it. But still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And next time, we will try. But I'm going to have to learn a little bit more about how to actually input coordinates to be able to make sure that we are able to implement that properly. That will require us to have a whole of government approach. And so with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $12 super chat from Ray's Friesland. And I just want to take a moment to thank everybody in the audience for being here tonight. And I'm going to assure you this is going to be a whole of super chat approach. And we'll make sure to put the top minds on the situation and ensure that we have a efficacy and perfect synchronization within our government response to see this issue through and through to the very end until we have a result which is satisfactory to the American people in the chat. Ray says, LSA.
Hey, he did the thing. He did the mic thing. He did the thing, y'all. He did it. He did the whole government approach thing. That was great. But I do got to think.
I love a good argument. I love a good debate.
Hit him with a drone strike. But I do have to thank you massively for support, Ray, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we still wouldn't be here to say, long live the Least Spring Army. And the Least Spring Army will never die. It never will. Because as long as people continue to believe in the Least Spring Army will continue to have a long and successful adventure. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. Hope that does address that amazingly well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LD Rizzo, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, LD, for that support. I do not see a comment attached, but of course, thank you very much for supporting the channel and helping to keep it running. And Enforcer, what say you?
It's the Wrestler, and I got to thank you so much for the support, LD Rizzo, for helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but people like you make this thing possible. You help the world to keep going round. And while you didn't throw in a comment, we are massively appreciative because, of course, our channel pretty much runs entirely on viewer support. And, you know, while no one has to support the channel, the folks who do make this thing a reality for everyone. And we are greatly appreciative of that. Greatly. And so with that, thank you once again. Hope that has addressed that well. And with that, it is time. It is time for us to move on to the next one. You know something, Matthew, I have to say here really quickly before we move on to the next one? I just got to say this, Matthew. I got to say this. Do you notice that once you move west of the Mississippi River, every single state's border, like with rare exceptions, becomes highly angular, like almost square?
That's because they wanted a whole of state approach, and they didn't really get into all this. I want this extra piece. I want this piece. I want that piece. It was just, here, have this chunk. It's yours.
But, you know, I liked it when they had actual borders that, like, were based on the rivers, like the Ohio River. You know, it just made the states look more interesting with their shapes. Because then you have squares out here. Like, I honestly think that the state...
Maybe they should just create one big unistate.
You know, man, what if we just abolish states altogether and put all of the power in the federal government?
Oh, federal government like that. That sounds horrifying.
You know, what if we also made it, Matthew, to where we actually elected the Supreme Court justices, so they only serve for 4-year terms of peace. So that way the entire government could be swayed from one thing to the next every 4 years.
Oh, no.
Don't you sense my sarcasm here, Matthew?
No, no.
Matthew's scared of that one because the reality of that would be atrocious. Like, that would be terrible, really. Man, you know, honestly, man, I'm going to have a hot take here. You know something I think that was terrible? Was, I believe it was the 17th, let me think here. Which amendment was it? Let me go check. Let's see. The 17th Amendment was a terrible amendment. That's a hot take. Oh. Because the 17th Amendment actually made it to where senators were no longer appointed by the governors of the state. They were instead elected by a federal election, which I don't like. That? Well, Matthew, the Senate was supposed to be, in a sense, equivalent to the House of Lords, in a sense. It was supposed to be like an appeal body of the Congress, because the House of Representatives was supposed to be like the House of Commons, and the Senate was supposed to be the House of Lords. So the representatives cooked up all of the bills and amendments and acts, and then the Senate was supposed to be a sort of a fail-proof system to where the state governments and the elected governors and representatives of each state kind of had a little bit of a way to say, I don't really know about that one, and then shoot it down there. When you elect your senators, you're pretty much just creating a second level of representatives instead of just having them appointed by the state governors. And also, that stripped a decent amount of power away from the governors of the states, because when you elected a governor, you were actually pretty much electing your ticket of senators along with them. Nowadays, when you elect a governor, it's just the governor. And so that stripped a decent amount of power and decision-making away from the state governors, which I feel is once again weakening the position of the states against the federal government.
That sounds like corruption central to me, like governors appointing senators. That sounds like a bad idea. And also, me personally, I want direct representation when it comes to the federal government. I don't want states, picking things to represent me in the federal government. I don't want that. So I'm glad they changed that part. But we shouldn't be having federal elections for Supreme Court justices. I'm not in favor of that, though.
Well, yeah, but if you're saying you don't like states picking senators, then do you like the president picking Supreme Court justices?
Oh, that's different. That's within the federal government. You're talking about like cross government picking of like a representation, like states picking federal representatives, which are senators. That's not something I'm in favor of.
But that's the way it worked all the way up until I think like 19. Let me go check. When was the 17th Amendment? Let's see here. 17th Amendment was passed in 1912. So the entire U.S. government ran that way up until 1912. And, a lot of people
I'm
always...
glad they changed that.
Oh, why?
Because I'm sure that the logic at the time was that the senators and the representatives in Congress should be representing directly the interests of the people. If the governor's appointing them, then they're not directly representing the people's interests. They never got to have a say in who got selected. So when it comes to the legislature, especially in the federal government, it should be a direct election, in my opinion. So I'm sure that was the logical, I guess you say, rationale at the time to change it, was that there needs to be more direct representation, and that makes sense.
I would say, though, man, I would disagree. Because the way it was originally created was the way that the founding fathers created it, because it was supposed to ensure that there wasn't just a mob rule throughout the whole of Congress, and that there was some sort of a regulation that ensured that the states themselves could represent their own interests, instead of having a party, go vote for this guy because, he's just a Republican or a Democrat. Instead, the state governors could pick people pretty much as their own representatives for their states, instead of, the people just going out and pretty much just picking them on a party line. So it's kind of similar to picking a Supreme Court justice, because, at the same rate, like when you're saying, there could be a lot of corruption there because who knows who the state governors are going to pick for senators. Well, I mean, there could be a decent amount of corruption with the president picking a Supreme Court justice equally. Who's to say he just doesn't pick his cronies to go pack the court whenever some justice drops dead?
I think where you're disagreeing, or where you're straying a little bit, is that you're using a modern day standard of today's, and hopefully nobody takes offense to this, today's somewhat ignorant electoral base. People are no longer up to date and really informed about what's really happening in the government. Most people don't have the attention span for it. Most people don't have the time because they're too busy working nonstop to try to, pay the bills and things like that. So they don't have time to learn about all the intricacies. Back when they did that and they changed it, I presume that according to what I know from political science, the electorate was a little bit more in tune with what was happening. And even though they didn't have the internet, which gives instantaneous access to the news, literally minute by minute, they were generally more well-read on it and had a little bit better attention spans to actually be civically involved. So they could probably have a better say in electing those people outside of just the party line standard that you're referring to, which is really prevalent in the modern day. They probably had a little bit more insight, I could say, back in the day. But today it's gotten a little bit perverted when it comes to the political system, is people vote based on their emotions and the politic lines and party lines, which is not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be informed voters going to the voting booth and actually voting for people that represent their interest, not the interest of some mega donor or something like that. But I think that's what you're getting mixed up, is modern versus old, like standards of voters.
But at the same time, though, man, it's not like, Americans back then were quite truly unequivocally geniuses. Like they were also,
They weren't geniuses, but they were more civically minded, and they stayed more up to date and in tune with what was happening outside of like the TikTok brain rot reels, which just feed you propaganda.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, though, what I'm saying, though, about the original intent behind the Senate is that it was supposed to be a direct equivalent, pretty much almost a parallel to the House of Lords, and that they were supposed to take a more detached view of issues coming before the Congress, meaning that they're not really supposed to be completely beholden to just public opinion and pretty much just be the House of Representatives 2.0. That was kind of what they were supposed to be, and I'm generally for having a body that's directly elected and then a body that is more detached. The Supreme Court fills that role quite well, just as an entire branch, pretty much the judicial branch, because they are able to be a lot more detached from the sway of public opinion and decide whether things are constitutional or not. And this is also something that originally I think did that as well, because you would see that a lot of the compromises that happened in American history usually came from the Senate because they were more detached and they were able to look at things more strategically instead of always having to focus like they are right now, along with the representatives, on getting super PACs for the next election. This seemed to me to be a much more better way to run things.
So just for historical context, because I'm not really like super well versed in why that change actually took place. I didn't really study that. But based on what I've researched here, the reason why they changed it from allowing the governors to appoint the senators to allowing the people to directly represent and also elect these people is because mainly it was combating corruption and deadlock. Because before the 17th Amendment, when the state legislators appointed senators, and it's not the governor, it's actually the state legislator that did it. The system was prone to bribery, corruption, and backroom deals. So that was apparently rampant so badly it caused the federal government to get involved and pass the amendment to actually change that because it was getting so rampant. Also, another big thing, like I mentioned, was that they said to have more direct representation, allowing the people to directly vote for them, that's considered more democratic, at least in the eyes of the people that were making that change at the time. And I would agree with them, actually. I think that is more democratic to have it directly elected like that. Outside of that, it was sort of like opinionated, but the main two things was it was combating corruption and increasing the democratic representation. That was the two main goals of it.
But I would still say that I would have to agree with the original beliefs of the founding fathers that the Senate is supposed to be a more detached sort of a group than the House, because having them directly elected makes them pretty much the House of Representatives 2.0. They really aren't like a detached body or a sort of a higher court, or not really higher court, but a higher house that's supposed to make sure to review something and see if it actually makes sense or not. Nowadays, they are pretty much beholden to the exact same whims that the House of Representatives are. And that's something that I think isn't really the greatest thing, because also it's saying they want to remove corruption. It's like, well, look at the senators there now, man. Like with the insider trading and everything, and also the lobbying and the super PACing and everything. It's like, did they really cut down on corruption, or did it just change the form of corruption? I'd say it just changed it. And so I would say that it'd make more sense, and also at least it would make more sense to go with this. And also, let's see. 1 second. I want to make sure this helped defeat the problem of the federal government being subject to special interests, having them appointed by state governors instead of, being directly elected where they could be they could be beholden to lobbyists, super PACs, so on, so forth, that sort of a deal. Although super PACs didn't even exist back then. It was just lobbyists in general. But also another thing, let's see here. Containing but different, as they would be conscientiously chosen by the upper house of state legislators for fixed terms and not merely inherited for life. It was hoped they would provide abler deliberation and greater stability than the House of Representatives due to the senator's status. So seems to me like that was a pretty all right system. Because in my opinion, man, the Senate these days is about as corrupt, in my honest opinion, as it would have been back then. So it's like, why in the world are we going to make the Senate literally the House of Representatives? It functions the same way now as far as elections and how people get into the office and hold the office of a senator as the House. There's really no difference between them rather than the time they serve and how much they get paid.
Yeah, I think the problem is, though, if you're talking about corruption in like modern day federal government, the problem is it's not just corruption limited to one individual. Because, back in the day, there's always been corruption. There will always be corruption in every government system in the past and into the future. It's just the way it is. It's always happening and it always will happen. It's just what happens when people get power. Sometimes it goes to their head and they see opportunities to be corrupt and crooked to make more money. And they say, oh, that's just like so easy. I might be able to get away with this. And then it starts snowballing into a humongous corruption disaster. It always happens like that. You try to curb it the best you can through regulation, but that's about the best you can do. The only problem is in the modern day, it's like a big cabal. It's like they all get together, the senators, the representatives, etc. They all, in the public, pretend like they're enemies with one another. And then when they're behind closed doors, they're all chatting it up and they all sort of discuss things with one another. And they might discuss things that are about to happen with a stock, and they might just happen to buy some of that stock before the stock price goes through the roof. That's obviously textbook corruption, but it's sort of permitted today because it's not banned. If they want to end corruption in the federal government, put term limits on the congressmen, congresswomen, and the senators, and ban all stock trading and securities trading amongst all those people as well. If you did that and they got that done, you'd see corruption dramatically reduced. The only problem is the cabal will never do it because that is in their interest. And who the hell goes against their own interest when you're making bank? That's pretty much nobody does that. So unless someone's selfless and gets in there and decides to put it on there, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. Those are also some really big issues. But at the same time, though, I did like the idea in concept of the Senate being a more detached body, not even really being elected, but more so appointed, kind of like Supreme Court justices, because in my opinion, man, that gives a lot more power to the state governments, because instead of them having, pretty much the federal government completely detached from them in every way, the state is pretty much picking their own representatives on the Senate level to represent the state as an interest inside of the Congress. Instead of the federal governments and the state governments being completely detached, the state governments actually are able to pretty much choose or determine their representatives to go represent the state's interests as a whole in the Senate.
Yeah, that's true. Also, by the way, I did see someone bringing up a different point. By the way, someone said the fact that stock trading in Congress and the Senate is not banned is absolutely crazy. It really is crazy. Like when you think about it, because when you see these committees that they have in the Senate and also Congress, they have committees that literally regulate through legislation these companies, which they can then trade on. So, for example, if they know they're about to pass legislation which is going to, like, for example, let's say hurt the chip industry, like the silicon chip industry in America. Well, let's say, like, I won't name the companies, but y'all know what industry I'm talking about. They know it's about to hurt those companies. It's going to cause the stock price to go down. Those Congress people or some Congresswomen will go out there and put shorts. They'll start putting puts on these companies, knowing the stock price is going to go down, and they'll make money off of it with the knowledge beforehand it was going to go down due to that legislation, which hadn't been announced just yet, but it ends up getting passed or introduced, which is obviously, in my opinion, insider trading. By pretty much every means. They have information the public doesn't have access to, and they act on it to make a profit. If anybody else did that, let's say a private citizen did that, you'd find yourself probably going to the federal pen for doing that. But apparently it's okay if you're elected to do that, which is obviously not okay. So they ought to fix that. But the same people that are responsible for fixing it are the same people benefiting from it. So they're never going to fix it unless someone comes along and forces them to.
How about this, Mandy? How about this with the idea of having the states appoint the senators instead of them being elected? What if it functioned just like the way a Supreme Court justice is picked? The governor of the state nominates a senator, and then the state legislators approve or deny that senator from becoming a senator for the next 6 years.
Say that one more time. I didn't really catch that.
So the governor, kind of like the president, will nominate a person for the position of a U.S. senator for, say, the state of Alabama, and then the state legislator of Alabama will either, much like the federal Congress, confirm or deny the nomination for that senator.
I just don't think a state should be involved at all in the selection of a federal representative like that. It's a federal position. So outside of the state simply conducting the election for the federal representative, I don't understand why the state should be meddling in it at all beyond that point, because it has nothing to do with the state.
Well, I mean, it kind of does have something to do with the state, because it's the United States of America. Like, the representatives are coming from the states. They're supposed to largely be representing the interests of the people of these United States, not the federal government as a whole institution of America, regardless of state boundaries.
But just for the purposes of the like, let's say, take a senator for example, like we were talking about, they're just representing the geographical area, which is the confines of the state. They're not representing like Alabama, like as in the state of Alabama. They're representing the people within those geographical confines. So the state handles everything within that geographical area on a state level, like for example, the everyday things like states, roads, etc. On the federal level, though, the senator doesn't just represent Alabama; they represent the entire country. Even though they're representing specifically the interests of those people from Alabama, they're still voting on things which affect the entire country. So I just think it should be very direct. Personally, I think it should be directly like the way it is now, not with the state interfering at all in it.
I generally like the idea of the state appointing the senators because if you think about it, the state is able to actually have its own representatives representing the interests of the state. So if you have, say, in the House of Representatives, like this idea, let's ban all coal mining, and then for some reason that just catches on, the state like West Virginia could have its own senators appointed that, of course, would be pro-coal because they know how many jobs would be at stake inside of their own state and how badly that would impact their people if those businesses were to disappear. And the state then is able to understand its own interest. Not a lot of people that vote in federal elections will understand how things will impact their state. A state governor and a state legislator that's appointing these people are going to have a general understanding on a more strategic level of what benefits their state. Like, for example, if the coal industry is a big thing that employs a lot of people, they're going to be pro-coal, while, a state like California that largely is heavy in the petroleum business is going to be pro-oil and anti-coal, possibly. So you're able to see that those kinds of senators more so have a grounded or more so strategic understanding of what's going on in their state, instead of largely just saying something like, I love coal, or I don't like coal, and then you have those two people going at it, and those senators may have been elected from West Virginia and may actually be operating against the best interests of the state of West Virginia and the citizenry of the state of West Virginia.
Maybe so, but I just think that if you have, like, for example, governors picking appointees or nominees for that position, then obviously it favors the governor in some way or another, because that's just the way things work. If the people elect them, then even if the people are overly emotional or they're not totally informed, at least if damage is done by their decisions, which of course we're seeing, people being picked that cause damage as a result of people's decision all the time in America. It's still the people's choice. So if the people decide to elect someone who is genuinely stupid and has no idea what they're doing and shouldn't be in a position, well, that's ultimately on the people because they elected them. That's what America's all about. You have the right to elect someone who's stupid if you choose to. If enough people and the majority choose that person, you get them. And if not enough people pick them, then they get booted out and they don't get elected. So I just don't think that a governor or one single person should be picking a representative, being a senator that represents the entire country just based on one person's nomination. That just doesn't seem very democratic to me.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, it's not really democratic that the president picks out the Supreme Court justices and then they're approved by the Senate. I mean, they're overturning the decisions of these people who have been elected by the citizenry, and if they're making stupid decisions, they're just making stupid decisions. Who's the Supreme Court to say whether it's right or wrong? They're not elected; they're just appointed. Like, we could make.
But that's within the federal system, though. That's something that's within the federal system. So that would be the same thing as like the state, like appointing, like, let's say, a judge in the state. Like, I wouldn't have any objection to that. It's a judge. It's something the state has a purview to do. And it's within the state's interest to appoint judges. They're in charge of their state. Same thing for the federal government. They're in charge. The executive is not in charge of the judicial branch. Let's make that clear. There's a separation of powers. But at the same time, it's within the same system. The difference in what you're talking about is it's the state picking somebody for the federal system, which represents the entire country. I don't like that. I like the people to pick that instead of just one person, which would be the governor.
Well, yeah, but the one person, the president, is picking a Supreme Court, which is the ultimate decider on any decision, state and federal, on a constitutional level.
Yeah, but it's a little bit different, though, because the legislature versus the judicial system, that's a bit different. The judicial system is intended only to interpret the law. The legislative system is designed to create law, which is basically where the actual inspiration for, like, the new laws we're creating is supposed to come from the legislature. I know the judicial branch is engaging in basically setting new precedent and creating law, but that's not really, like, they're not supposed to be going so overboard they're creating new law. They're supposed to just be interpreting what already exists. So it's kind of gotten a little bit out of control to a certain extent, but that was not the like original intent, if you know what I mean.
But in my opinion, though, I think I'll have to stick with my guns on this one. I think it would be better to have a state-appointed Senate position for every state, because then that allows for there to be a little bit of a it allows for there to be breaks, like on the Congress, so that way it just doesn't run into insanity. Like the House of Representatives could run into literal unparalleled insanity, kind of like it is these days, and then the Senate could be completely untouched by that for the large part and still be the Senate, instead of what we're seeing right now, where both of them have just run completely amok. You got people out there going, no, I did not call Senator something and ignorant, and all that. You got stuff like that nowadays in the Senate, so it's literally just the House. It's just that there's less senators. There's 100 of them instead of 435, and they get paid more, but they think and operate the exact same way as the representatives. And it's like, if that's what we're doing, why in the world have a bicameral legislator when we could just have a unicameral legislator that has one body, which is just the House of Representatives? Because if the Senate is operating the exact same way as them, what the hell is the point of having a second step? Just have the House, approve or shoot down bills, and then the president can sign off on them or veto them, and the Senate isn't even necessary at that point anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stick to my guns on this one too. I like directly electing my representatives personally. I like to directly elect the senators and the Congress people. Even though these days it seems like we're not getting really good candidates for anything, to be perfectly honest. And that's not a jab at either party. That's just a general observation across the board. It seems like people that were qualified for those positions generally don't want to take them anymore for whatever reason. Either politics have gotten too nasty and most intelligent people don't want to get into that mess, or maybe the money's just not good enough for the people that don't want to get into it. I'm not sure what the deal is. Seems like we got pretty stale candidates coming up these days, but at least I get to pick the best of the stale candidates. I don't want the governor picking it.
Well, I mean, I guess that's just a difference of opinion between you and me. And also, I see some people saying "we the people," but it's "we the people" with presidentially appointed Supreme Court justices approved by the Senate. And at least originally in this country, the senators were pretty much appointed by the state legislators and the state governors. So it's "we the people," but there was already a decent amount of regulatory caveats to that at the initial start, because it's "we the people," but it's not "we the people, we're forming a direct democracy and there's no House or Senate or president, everyone just votes on it. You get a white rock or a black rock and you throw it in a pile and we count them all at the end and it's yays and nays, and that's how it goes. It wasn't like that. Like a lot of people take the whole basic punchlines "we the people" and then take it to a literal extent. "We the people," that's just the starting of a preamble to the Constitution that actually lays all that out. And in the original Constitution created by the Founding Fathers in 1787, they said that the senators were to be appointed by the states instead of being elected directly. And as far as
it feels like in the modern day they've rewritten it from "we the people" to more like "you the people." It's more like it feels like it's changing more to that sort of mentality than it is "we the people."
And honestly, these days, man, it sounds more like "we the corporations." It's in special interest groups. That's pretty much really how it runs instead, because you can vote for anyone, man, and then the super PACs are really what's running the show. It's the truth of it. But anyways, with that, I hope that it. Oh, really? It appears that I'm in the wild minority right here. Honestly, that is a landslide if we've ever seen it. So, Matthew, what do you got?
So 92%, probably the biggest majority I've ever seen on any poll in my lifetime, says, I want my senators directly elected by the people, while 8% said, I want them appointed by the state. And this one was not shocking, because I don't think many people would say, and not saying the enforced argument has no merit, I'm just saying that most people out there, just in the majority, would say that they do not want anybody picking their representatives except themselves, because you'll rarely ever hear anybody say they want to give away the right to directly pick the person that represents them in the federal government. Not that it probably makes any difference, to be perfectly honest with you, but at least you feel like you got some power, and that feeling of power is very important in the American system. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I'm still going to have to stick with the 8%, not the 80%, the 8%, because in my opinion, I think that makes the state government far more important to elect and decide on, because don't y'all notice these days, folks, that nobody gives a damn about anything that goes on in their states, and it all is pretty much all the power is in the federal government these days. No one looks at their state governments. No one pays attention to them. The state governments practically have no power. They get steamrolled and stomped on every day by the federal government. It's literally like holding the governor's position almost seems like a joke these days with how little power a state government actually holds. Giving them the ability to actually pick and appoint their senators seems to me to give a lot more power to the states, because while it is a country, federal republic, and it would be great to vote for the senators and the representatives, I feel like it's honestly it's greatly weakened the power of the states with how the tax system works, and also how the states are no longer appointing senators. They're just directly elected by the people, which makes the federal government alien to that of the states and doesn't give the states any actual representation in the federal government. The federal government literally operates on a system unto its own with no state involvement whatsoever. And originally when the U.S. was founded, it was a confederation, so that meant that the states had more power than the federal government. Then when the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was finished, the federal government and the states were supposed to be equal to each other, and now with the passing of the 17th Amendment, and also with how the tax system works these days, with the federal government getting the lion's share of tax revenues while the states get pennies, it pretty much feels like monetarily and politically, the federal government holds all of the power, and the state governments are practically at the whim of the federal government in every way, which is what I generally find an issue with, because I think that states should have, quite truly, equal power on par with the federal government on any given moment, which it seems to be, to me these days, to be sorely missed, and it's something that's pretty much made the states almost figure placeholders in name, more so than actual states independent of each other in the country, but still, with the federal government being the ultimate decider in between disputes of the states. So with that, I hope that addresses that my side fairly well. Clearly in the minority there, but that would be my 2 cents on it. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, we do have our first image coming out of the Ukraine-Russia peace talks in Istanbul, and Enforcer, I sent that to you via Discord, by the way. You can show that to the audience if you'd like to let them take a look here. It appears to be, I think, the Ukrainian foreign minister, the fellow on the left, and that is obviously Lindsey Graham in the front there, smiling very dignified there at the Ukrainian fellow. And also, that is Marco, who holds 3 different job titles right there on the right, a very busy man who works 3 different jobs. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, I got to tell you, man, the economy is rough when a Latin American man's having to work 3 jobs to support his family. That's a tough one.
Tough times.
Tough times, I tell you. But there's Lindsey Graham. He's about to say, your hair's a lot like mine, or something like that. He's about to say something. He's about to say something there in a second. But beyond that, also, weren't they supposed to arrive tomorrow? I heard that the U.S. delegation was supposed to arrive on Friday.
I don't know.
Oh Lord. Anyways, with that, let's see. I can't even read the chat. I'm laughing too hard. I'm squinting too hard to actually read the chat. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I feel like I did a pretty good Lindsey Graham there, folks. Like that might have been one of the best ones. Anyways, with that, it's time. It's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a $15 donation. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that $15 support, and we appreciate that very much. He said, Baba Moo, hot dog man, oh man, I can't pay the rent. Moo, quack, moo. I'm missing 3 wheels on my office chair. Meow. I'm homeless in D.C. Quack, oink. Here since day 4. Bye-bye.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say that it is a very nice, wonderful thing that you have supported this channel and helped to keep on running with the traditional animal noises tonight. And I gotta say, the hot dog man is still the butt of jokes. Pretty much given up, and he's working at a Shell gas station, but he will always be the butt of jokes here on this channel. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. We always love to have you here, Duncan VR, and we always love the animal noises. And, of course, we are rolling on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Matthew Zayak, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Matthew, for that support. He said, Germany has the largest population and economy in the EU and the 3rd largest economy in the world. And there's nothing strange about Germany wanting to become the strongest military power in Europe. honestly, Matthew, I would say, generally speaking, no, it's nothing really wrong with it. I would say, like, there's nothing wrong with Germany becoming a strong military power. The catch is, though, the statement, we want to become the strongest. That part right there got me a little bit leery for a minute. But I obviously, with Germany as an ally, I'm not dissing on Germany, not saying that they're bad or anything like that. I'm not saying they're going to do anything horrible to anybody. It's just that, we have to operate with, the past in mind when we go forward into the world, and we have to keep things in mind when we say them and the way we phrase them. But that's just my opinion. I think a lot of people disagree with that, but that's where I'm coming from. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I'd agree with you. I think it'd be fine for Germany to rearm and become the strongest military in Europe, because, if they're on our side this time, hell, think of what they could do. I mean, they actually gave everyone a run for their money in 2 world wars, almost on their own sometimes. So it's like, hell, if they could do that and they were our enemy, what could they do on our side? The potential is limitless there. So I'd completely agree with you. And also, Germany is the 3rd largest economy in the world. They actually beat out Japan, I think, last year to become the 3rd largest economy on the planet, which is really impressive, actually, that Germany holds that position even in this day and age. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to none other than Adam McLean, who puts in a very generous $20 donation. And thank you very much, Adam, for that 20, and we do appreciate it very much. And he said, I honestly don't think there's ever going to be another channel like this one.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Adam McLean. And I got to say, there may never be another channel like this, and I thank you for the kind words. We actually had a really long rabbit hole tonight on something that was decided over 100 years ago. Should senators be elected or appointed? And it is those kinds of politics that we are deeply invested in, folks. It is politics that is so far detached from modern reality that somehow, while that was the prevailing opinion of the Founding Fathers, only 8% of people agreed with me, and I had the opinion of the Founding Fathers, which is really crazy to think how much this country has changed and how far it has come. And I gotta say, it is very admirable that people do want to have a direct representation in the Senate, but I personally I would be honest with y'all, folks. I would like to see the power return to the states, so that way they can kind of have their own destiny making decision power, more so than the federal government just being its own thing. But I do thank you so much for the kind words, Adam McLean, and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. But the truth is, folks, is that no matter how much I would want to go back that way, no one's ever going to support that. So you kind of got to play the cards you're dealt, and we got to just kind of recognize that everyone is bought and sold by the BlackRock Corporation in the Senate and the House. So, hey, hey, that's great. No more housing for anyone. Or if they build it looks like crap, it'll fall apart in 10 years. And, it costs $1 billion to buy a 2,000 square foot house. It's fine either way. Probably would have happened either way, honestly, because, you could pretty much just bribe your way into the Senate position if you were appointed. So, elected or appointed, I think the results are the same, folks. So, honestly, kind of a pointless conversation that Matthew me had, because what does it matter? I think that Matthew had it down more pat than me, that we really ought to get rid of the insider trading and also get rid of a lot of these lobbyists and special interest groups in Congress. And I think that truly would be the way to fix the crux of the issues that are rooting from the incessant corruption that existed in both systems, where the senators were either appointed or they're elected. But with that, I hope that does.
These days, it's like, do we even elect the people anymore? And honestly, it's like, would the deep tentacles that the super PACs and these major donor bodies have on the electorate now? It feels like we're barely even electing these people anymore. It's just like the candidates they get put up for election. They're typically heavily sponsored by these donation groups. And it's like, you don't really stand a chance against somebody who has like the funding of like $10 million for an election versus someone who has like $5,000 to $10,000. You can't defeat that. And if the donor groups pick one candidate over the other, they've essentially picked your candidate for you. So at that point, it's like, did we even have an election? Because the people that were picked for candidates or the ones that had a chance were the ones that had the money that the donor groups gave.
Is a really ridiculous system, and I think it's absolutely jacked up these days how it's running like that. It's really annoying, man, because when you think about it, really whoever does get the most campaign funding, they get their face out there the most and people vote for them. And then once they're elected, man, people are dumb enough that they just keep voting for them every single time the election comes around. So you'll have representatives and senators. Like one thing that's crazy, this is actually a good example of this. Did y'all know that when and I'm not pointing out Biden specifically, but this is one that's crazy to me. Did y'all know that when Biden first became a senator, it was in the first term of Nixon? Like, that's insane. Like, someone is there that long. Like, there's loads of other people that have been there that long, like Mitch McConnell, other folks like that on all sides. It's like, that is absolutely insane that they got in literally during a totally different era, and they're still there because people just keep voting for them. Like, honestly, I think term limits ought to be implemented as well, because like, I believe in shaking it up. Even if you like these people, it's like, yeah, maybe the people who are voting for Mitch McConnell or Biden when they were senators and representatives, maybe they do like him. But I feel like shaking it up a little bit, and maybe even if they're in the same party, just getting another representative or a senator, just so that there's a different face representing your constituency. Like, that's what I would think. And I think that.
So, also, another problem as well is so far right now, it seems like pretty much across all elections in the country, not really, I will say not really on the state level so much, more on the federal level, there seems to be a trend that we're moving toward candidates really pushing propaganda, because when they put out campaign advertisements and things like that, and these short videos on TikTok, in my opinion, that's propaganda by definition, because it's what the candidate wants you to see, and it's very curated and very performative. At the same time, though, they're moving away from doing debates. Like, nobody seems to want to debate anymore, because that's the actual real person you're electing, is the one who's showing up at the debate, and that's how they really perform under pressure. And that's really what the electorate needs to see, is how these people actually function under pressure. And it seems to be that nobody wants to debate anymore. Everybody wants to rely on propaganda that their campaign puts out to get elected, which is totally a perversion of the entire election system. That's not the way it's supposed to work. We're supposed to see these people in action, supposed to see them out in the public, addressing their criticism, addressing the good points and the bad points. And they're moving away from that, which, and once again, indicates they're really not looking to inform you of the truth or sell themselves to you. They're looking to indoctrinate you into voting for them, which is not the way it's supposed to work.
And I don't like that either, because another thing that's become absolutely annoying to me is that's why the Senate and the representatives to me look the same. Because I saw someone say, and this is a good point, and let me go get it here really quickly. Let's see here. It was further up. Merck said, enforcer representatives deal with local state issues and petition the Fed for funding. Senators are supposed to be scholars and experienced politicians who are tasked to refine bills that pass. And that's the way it should work. But the problem is that the voters don't know that. And the founding fathers knew that as well. Because the truth is, folks, is that the intricacies of government, a lot of people will never be bothered to actually know that. So this regulatory body that the Senate is supposed to be, these scholars and people who are a step back from the grind of being a representative, that doesn't exist anymore. Because the way that the senators run their elections and the way that they are elected is on the exact same kind of propaganda-style rhetoric that their representative counterparts are making in the House to be elected. So they end up being pretty much the same kind of representation for the citizenry. It's just that one of them, in most cases, in all cases, there's only 2 senators for each state, and then representatives are divvied up into multiple districts representing a specific set number of people, or at least they're supposed to. And that is just a ridiculous kind of a thing with how it's running these days, and that's why it just annoys me with how the Congress is really turned into, because there is no difference between a senator and a representative. I mean, have y'all seen a congressional inquiry lately? I mean, there's no intelligence in any of those things left. Like, they don't actually ask real questions anymore. They ask these stupid questions. They pretend like they're gotchas, and they're not gotchas because they're just so damn dumb, or they're so ingrained in their political party rhetoric, they actually don't even know how to think independently or cook up something fresh. Like, they'll come out
and decorum's going out the window too. Like, you have people dropping the F-bomb in the middle of Congress. You have them fighting with people, threatening to fist fight the witnesses that are showing up. It's like a clown show now. It's not just one side. It's both sides. I've seen people. There's extreme lunatics on both of the sides that hop up acting like fools and stuff at these committee briefings and hearings. And it's like, what the hell? It's like you're in like the highest like building in the land, the U.S. Capitol building, and you're acting like a clown. It's like, was it really worth it to make your moment on TV to look like a clown just to get attention? It's like that's a bad look for the country as a whole.
And and there will be things like they'll bring in, say, Amazon, You know, they'll bring in Bezos in front of an inquiry to ask him about his company and to pretty much inquire and figure out if Amazon's a monopoly or not. But then so many of these people are stuck in just trying to get out their campaign rhetoric slogans that they don't even really look at Amazon as whether it's a monopoly or not, and actually weigh out its values and variables to figure out if they actually should start to antitrust the Amazon corporation, just as a singular example. Instead, they're up there and you have one side that says, big companies are bad, destroy them, and then the other one, no, big companies are good, we love them. You know, it's like no one actually looks at it and goes, okay, well, Amazon is killing off pretty much every single retailer out there in America right now. Maybe there is some kind of regulation that we need so that way they don't run everyone out of, brick and mortar businesses where there are no jobs that exist like that anymore. Maybe we need to regulate that. Like there's no thought of that. Like a reasonable one, because that's a middle ground kind of a statement. It's protecting the interest of other people and stopping rampant capitalism, pretty much unfettered capitalism, from destroying other people's livelihoods and jobs and literally upending the country top over, which has never done that. Like in the whole history of the U.S., there actually has been a great deal of government regulation to ensure that those kinds of things don't happen, really since the 1870s. And nowadays, we just let stuff like that go. It's like, oh, Amazon's going to destroy every brick and mortar store in the country and, millions of jobs as a result of that. Oh, that's fine. We'll just let it keep going. It's like, what? It's like, you can't do that. It's like, there's millions of people out there whose livelihoods, they're supporting families. They own houses. They have mortgages to pay, bills to keep up. They're going to lose their jobs,
Who cares about a mortgage when you have a nice little lump of sum of money coming your way? Who cares about a mortgage?
Yeah, but it's like it's just ridiculous how that's being run these days. It's just it's a damn shame, because it doesn't look out for the interests of the citizenry anymore. It's too caught up in its own rhetoric on all ends, and it's also too caught up on making sure to stuff the pockets of these congressmen and senators with dollars from their lobbyists in special advisory positions after their tenures are over, and it does not look out for the interests of the common citizenry whatsoever. It's a very annoying thing, and it's so easy, man, to see even in other corrupt periods of the government, where the government actually was looking out for the common interests of the citizenry and looking to regulate and maintain a balanced system that would benefit everyone in the country. And nowadays, that's just gone out the window. It's a
complete lack of civic mindedness, a mix of antisocial, pervasion going across the country. It's a lot of things. Honestly, I think really seriously, I think the problem is the society as a whole. And I'm not trying to be a doomer. America's not doomed, by the way. America is still the best of all the countries struggling around the world. Every country in the entire world right now is struggling. If nobody's aware of that, I think most people are. The whole world's in a bit of a crap pot right now. But the United States is still at the top of the trash pile, so that's a good thing. The country's still doing good on pretty much every aspect, but the society becoming antisocial and the society starting to hate one another because they've been told by people that are greedy, you should hate the other person because they're not us, therefore vote for me. And that has created a lack of civility. It's created a lack of civic mindedness where people used to want to help one another out. They no longer want to do that. They want to rip the other person down because we've been brainwashed now through social media and various other methods to hate the next person. When you have that and you can't even have society function on a basic level of civility, then other things that are of a higher nature, like having a government that functions efficiently, that becomes nearly impossible. And that's where it's at now. So now it's like every man for themselves, rip the system off as much as you can. And that's the way the politicians are operating, is basically in response to the society that's sort of moving that way.
And we also vote in these absolutely disgusting, degenerate kind of people. Like the absolute, just the objectively worst people that we could vote in. We vote in. Like, when you look at them all, look at the ones that have been voted in recently and tell me if any of them are an upstanding citizen. None of them are. I mean, like, all of, remember that one, Matthew, recently that was getting a little handsy in the theater and had to get kicked out? And then there was the other one that can't be bothered to wear a suit. And then there was the other one that was quite truly lied their way into the position and was taking bribes and scamming people. It's just an endless slew of these degenerates. it's just it's a crazy thing to see, because I think that when we vote for these people, you shouldn't be voting for them just on their policy points. You should also be voting for them on their character, because a lot of these people are absolutely neurotic. Like I don't think there's a logical thought that goes through their heads, and I feel like the reason why these people are getting elected is because they're getting elected in by a neurotic voter base. I guess they relate. I don't know, but
you know what it matches up to?
What?
Who's popular on social media, like Instagram, places like that, TikTok?
Neurotic individuals.
It's the people that are on the fringe. That's the people who are popular. Like, for example, you have, and this is just an example, I'm not saying like they're world class or something. For example, take the Island Boys, these two individuals who are quite on the fringe, I would say, by pretty much every standard, and delve into really bad debauchery. It's that type of people that are popular for whatever reason, and that's the same people that are being found to be suitable for these positions of power that are actually civic positions that actually require a lot of knowledge, a lot of civic mindedness, and also simple common sense. That's the same type of people being elected to these positions, because that's who's popular now and that's who gets the votes. People are electing people based on their entertainment value instead of whether or not they're qualified, which is insane.
But at the same time, though, as a counter to that, that's never really happened before either. Because think about it, man. Back in like the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, there were people on the fringe out there like that too. Like Elvis. Elvis was considered wildly on the fringe when he first arrived on the scene. And we still saw, and I would have to say, folks, that objectionably, I would say that really every single president looking back in the past now was actually pretty decent. I'm going to break my like post 1960s rule here to say Kennedy was pretty good. Let's see. Nixon was pretty good. Beyond the whole Watergate thing, Nixon was actually very good on foreign policy. Gerald R. Ford was good. Jimmy Carter was good. Bill Clinton, beyond the whole Monica Lewinsky thing, he was all right. Bush was all right. I mean, hell, Obama was all right. I mean, looking at them as actual people, like whether they were balanced or not publicly, they actually were. I mean, a lot of them weren't really neurotic. And a decent amount of them did make fairly good foreign policy decisions, although there was a slip up here and there, and that will happen. But beyond that, it's just
the rise of social media. That's what it coincides with.
It has to be
the rise of social media. That's coincides with what you just described. In your opinion, if you think the change started happening, it coincides with social media becoming super mainstream and extremely popular, where every American in the country has a smartphone and they have access to every social media platform and they're involved in most of them. It coincides with that. And it's not a conspiracy theory. When you have social media, you basically have these politicians and these big donor companies. They have a method to propagandize their information straight to your eyeballs, literally in your home and in the palm of your hand. That's dangerous. That's extremely dangerous. People have not fully realized how dangerous that is. I think the federal government realized that TikTok is very dangerous, and they're starting to realize what kind of power that really has over people, and that's why they tried to ban it. But now there's been some shady business happening, and now it's going to potentially stay. So, that it's social media. That's what it is completely.
Yeah, it has to be social media, because there's never been an election of just absolutely neurotic people until social media became a big thing. Like hell, even going just back a while ago, I just got to be honest with you all, just being neutral here. Bush and Obama were not bad picks. I mean, when you look back now, 12 years later at both of them, it's like, hell, they weren't really that bad. I mean, it's a shame to really think that, because I remember back as a kid, everyone's like, oh, they're getting rough these days. Like the presidents are getting tough. I remember hearing that about Bush and Obama, and now you look back at them and it's like, dang, they actually appear to be like the calm of the storm these days compared to what we're going through now with both the prior presidents, the current one and the last one. It's a really interesting thing. But of course we want to make sure to keep it politically neutral. So we make sure to take shots at both sides, because honestly, there are fair shots to be made there across the board. But anyways, if you like what we're saying,
if we're social media, does that mean we're part of the problem?
I would say we're not. We're probably a balance to most of it, because, we don't go around going, we're just a faucet boys, and buying a whole bunch of stupid furniture and jewelry and shit. We don't do that. So I think we're generally a balance to most of it, hopefully. What do y'all think,
I feel like we're bringing information. The only part that I would say is, I guess you could say, appealing. And you have to do this to an extent, folks. Like, for example, obviously there are serious topics that we discuss, but at the same time, we try to add a bit of levity to it, because you can't just be like a brick wall and expect people to listen to you. That's not going to work, because you have to be somewhat relatable or charismatic somewhat, which means letting your personality out a bit, or otherwise people are not going to listen, because who the hell's going to listen to someone just talking like a brick wall? That's not going to last very long. So that's the only side of us that's a little bit, not informational. But outside of that, though, I feel like we present just information that you can't get anywhere else. So I would say that we're providing a value service on top of a little bit of side entertainment value to keep people listening. So I don't think we're part of the problem, but I might be a little bit biased because I'm the person who's a co-host on the show. So I don't know.
We got an invested interest in saying that we're balanced. But what do y'all think, folks? I'd like to hear from y'all. And if y'all agree with what we're saying, vote for Enforcer for president in 2040 and Matthew for vice president in 2040. We'll be running on the same ticket, maybe. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. I hope we were able to speak to all of y'all about our equal concerns for the nation and our republic that we all live in and hold quite dear. Because we are concerned citizens at heart. We always like to think that there's things to improve, and we love the country deeply. That's why we speak of it like this. And also we make it as fair as we can, because speaking about it in a partisan way where it's a Republican problem or a Democrat problem really isn't getting to the crux of the matter, which is that it's a systemic issue that exists across the whole of the government at the moment on both sides. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jack Ragnarsson, who puts in a 10. And Jack says, did you know that during the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, around 200 North Korean students joined the fight on the side of pro-Western Hungarians? Some escaped to Austria too.
And that's interesting. I thank you for the support and sharing that. I actually did not know that. And you're actually going to inspire me to be reading about that here after the stream. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Chill Intelligence, who puts in a 10. And Chill Intelligence said, every state has 2 senators for equal power, and that's true. Government may temporarily appoint replacements for vacancies. Elections take time. States retain full representation until voters elect senators to full terms.
And I thank you for the support. And that is true. Is that it's supposed to give it's supposed to give equal power to each state, at least in the Senate, and it's supposed to be considering them as state issues. But I still feel like that's a little bit weakened by having them directly elected by the people. Not that it's going to change. That's just more so wishful thinking on my end. Is that it would change? No one will want it to change. And really, it wouldn't even matter when you think about the same kind of problems that we were both talking about exist in both systems. But beyond that, I do thank you for sharing that, because that is true about the Senate. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one is going to go to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Bruce, for that 5. He said, a song request. Please play by Rockstar at some point in the stream. We'll wait, and it should give you time for a quick break, too. And keep it up, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for support. And we actually did play that for you at the very beginning of the stream, in the first minute. I think the first 3 minutes, actually. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and keep it running day in and day out. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Thomas D. Orazio and also Mark-Andre Burnett, who each put in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Thomas and Mark, for that support. And we also appreciate it very much. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank each and every one of you for the support. As well, you didn't throw in comments. The support is massive and helps us to keep this channel running each and every day. And of course, thank you so much once again to lots of you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Octavian Temerasanu, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Octavian, as well, for that support. He said, thanks for being the best source of news on Ukraine and also making it entertaining. And please take a question from the LSA chat. And Slava Ukraine.
Hey, and Slava Ukraine. And thank you so much for the support and the kind words. We try our best here. We really do. And we will make sure to get a live chat in ya Anna. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and also let me type out one thing. I was trying to desperately get this last option on this poll I was trying to run. There we go. So the live chat question is going to go to Sheffield Steel, who says, the UK has jets based in Amari, Estonia. Any idea why they didn't respond to the incursion by the Russian jet?
I would have to say I would not know at the moment, unfortunately. A lot of the answers to all the finer, minute details are largely unknown because we don't get that much information to know all of the logic and explanations that the Estonians would give as to why they really didn't respond in any form to the incursions in the airspace. So I'd largely have to declare ignorance on that, unfortunately. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and keep it running. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Aqualung58, who puts in a 5 and says, what we need are term limits from top to bottom. Move up or go back to your civilian job.
Thank you for the support. And I would have to say that, in my opinion, I would believe that would largely be a good move. Term limits should be a thing for largely every position in the government. The only position I think where it's perfectly fine that someone serves for life is Supreme Court justice. The Supreme Court and largely most judgeship positions, at least on a federal level, them serving for life is fine by me. I think that's perfectly fine. They're supposed to be more so an appellate body, meaning that they're supposed to be very much removed from the ebb and flow of politics and look at things from a more strategic or clinical perspective. And so I would say that that's the one thing that should remain untouched. Beyond that, however, I think that the office of the president having a 2-term limit is a fabulous move. I think that was a stroke of genius. Although that was largely followed up until FDR. Everyone only did 2 terms as a sticking point of tradition, because that's what George Washington laid out as the precedent to the office of the president. But I would also say that Congress members, both in the Senate and the House, should have specific term limits outlined for them. And also, I think that should come after we see that lobbying, a lot of the lobbying we're seeing right now, and as well as insider trading, is completely outlawed through acts of Congress. Because right now, with how it's working, a lot of them would probably be fine with imposing term limits, and then what we're going to do is we're going to see that all these people get term limited out, and then they're going to end up becoming special advisors to Northrop Grumman, Coca-Cola, BlackRock Investment Group, so on and so forth. And then you'll see, oh, that's why they were fine with the term limits. It's because they were going to get lined up with nice, cushy, well-paying advisory jobs by these large companies that were lobbying them. Oh, no wonder. And then we didn't really fix a lot of the systemic issues that is really causing the corruption, which is where they're able to line themselves up to get these nice jobs once they get out of Congress, and also to line their pockets with speaking arrangement fees and such things as that. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But I do thank you so much once again, and I would agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And also, Miss Disa said they do that now, and that is true. They do that now for the ones that ever get outed. But very rarely, many of them do.
Indeed. But we also have a poll currently running right now, and the question is, what caused the voter base in America to become so divided and hostile? Because it appears to be, no matter which party you align with, everybody can agree it's pretty damn divided and hostile across the board. But 50% said a lack of education, meaning ignorance, while 16% said bad candidates and bad choices, while 22% said social media addiction, and 13% said a lack of civility and decency. And I know that pretty much all these options are applicable. Like these are all correct options, but mainly I forgot to add this keyword right here, the adjective. What is the primary reason why it's like that? So I think most people answered it based on that premise. I just forgot to add the word. But I would say, generally speaking, I'm actually with a 22%. I think it is social media addiction, and also the fact that social media is so prevalent now, and everybody has a phone that has access to social media. Literally, whenever there's a free second, people are hopping on there and looking at it. So it's literally propaganda every free second of the day, which is dangerous. I would say that's the primary reason. Now, lack of education or ignorance. The weird thing is Americans and people around the world have such easy access to information today, more so than any time in history. But the problem is, most of that information they have access to is not quality information. It's either false, it's propaganda, it's written to mislead you, and it's also extremely biased. So even though we have a wide array of information sources, they're not of good quality most times, unless you know how to cross-reference your news articles, sources, etc., to get to the real truth. Because a lot of people are being dishonest these days. Even media sources are being dishonest. Lack of civility, definitely true, and bad candidates, that's damn true. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it really is all of them. But I would say generally that it's the lack of education and social media addiction that combine to create a lethal combination. So I'd have to really go with both of them if I could just, pick both of them. But if I had to go with one or the other, I'd actually say it's more so social media addiction than anything. I'd actually go with the 24%. Because a lack of civility is something that's becoming really common these days. And I would say that it generally was started because of the what would we call it, the rebels of society about 40 or 50 years ago, where you just break all societal norms for the hell of it, because what does it matter and what are they for? That kind of has laid out a entire generational precedent at this point, where people treat each other as badly as they can, because what's the point of treating them nicely? Because that's a societal norm, and these days we're rebelling against the system endlessly, although to what end we do not know. It's just really just breaking the system to break it in every way, even if it means breaking traditions. So I would say that that's a part of it. And someone said punk. I wouldn't say punk. It was just more so the the counterculture that popped up. Not really punk in itself. I'm not saying rock is the problem. Like, it's not that. Like, honestly, music has no impact, but it's more so the counterculture sort of a movement that started to happen, that pretty much just started to question everything, even if it really didn't make sense to question it, like, trying to be nice to other people. Like, I don't know what was the whole kick that started back in the day that still exists to this day, where people are like, yeah, it would be nice to be a part of an organization where we treat everyone like crap that is not a part of our organization. I don't know why that came into being ever. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I know why.
Well, I know why, but it still doesn't really make much sense when you think about it from a societal.
People that join those organizations like that, it's typically stemming from the fact that either they have never felt a sense of belonging, they've been subjected to some type of emotional abuse throughout their life, and therefore they feel a need to have belonging within one of these organizations. And even though these organizations will be extreme, they feel the need that person is missing in their life. So that's why they're easy prey for these organizations, even if they're heinous. And when those heinous organizations started popping up in mass, because it was the social movement of the time, they had a wide audience of people to pick from and recruit to join those organizations. So it kind of just it was a crisis within a crisis, in other words.
And I would have to agree with that. But still, it doesn't make any sense from a societal standpoint, at least in my opinion. But moving on from that, I would say social media addiction is also a pretty significant one as well, because in my opinion, social media addiction has been absolutely detrimental to society as a whole. It's made people antisocial, and on top of that, social media it tries to game psychologically the system the best it can, your system, your brain, mentally, and so a lot of people figure out how to game it. And I got to say, this channel tries to do that as well, because when we're telling you all the major news, we don't just throw it out like it's a ticker tape lecture for 2 hours. We add in humor, we add in all those things, because we want to make sure that people are interested and invested. But social media takes that to an extreme degree for the most part. For example, groups like TikTok or really short videos, they're attempting to try and game your dopamine receptors to where you get the most pleasure in the shortest amounts of time. So little bits of meaningless moments of time put together to pretty much just get you stuck on there. And that means that people's attention spans are shortened, and that also means that is an amazing delivery system for messaging and propaganda, because you're able to get it out in someone's daily grind of just looking at meaningless stuff for about a minute apiece. And so it's an easy way to disseminate propaganda, and at a short duration that the propaganda is being presented, it allows no time for further elaboration, examination, or study, meaning that it's just taken largely at face value. And that's what a lot of people do. That's why people read headlines and they don't read articles anymore. And that's why the headlines are the most meaningful and impactful thing in anything. That's why our thumbnails and titles are actually the most meaningful and impactful thing we make every night, because that's what determines whether people are going to watch our show or someone else's. So that's really also showing that as well. Bad candidates and choices, clearly I would say that that's also an issue as well. The candidates pool is getting worse by the year, I would say. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. It honestly is showing, like, I would say the voting pool is almost showing a disease in society itself through all of the other afflictions, and it's representing itself in the candidate pool. Because you don't see boring candidates winning anymore. You don't see those people who are just the the little guys in the corner, pretty much guys like Eisenhower and Nixon were the guys who sit down there on a table and they sit there and map everything out, plan it out. They're cunning, they scheme. You don't see that kind of stuff anymore. It's up in your face, neurotic people who are really emotional and driven by rhetoric, and that's about it. And there's really no driving substance to any of it. And then lack of education and ignorance is also quite a big one as well. I'd really say it's a blend of them all. But social media and lack of education is quite significant. People do not care to learn how the government works. And it shows greatly in how people understand how things work in the public. People don't really understand where their rights end or where they go. Like people don't even understand that kind of stuff. It's all just kind of basic guesswork for most people in the public. Like, for example, when someone tells you to leave their private property, you have to leave. You do not have a right to stay. Some people don't know that. Some people think that you can do whatever on your private property if you own it. Like you could shoot someone and get away with it, which isn't the case. It's not true. And a lot of people don't understand those kinds of things, just on private property as an example, or much less everything else. And it's because of a lack of education and ignorance. And I actually would have to say that kind of is also on the people themselves, because I remember in school, even here in Alabama, we actually had civics classes all the time. Most of our classes weren't even history classes, they were civics classes, explaining how the government worked and what some of your rights were. And most kids in those classes would not want to listen because they would say, oh, this is just stupid and it doesn't even matter. And it's like, well, it actually does. And, nowadays, those very people who were getting C's and D's on basic civics are out there in the world right now voting. They don't even really know what they're voting for, how the system works, what their interests are, what other people's interest would be, what their state's interest would be, what the federal government's interest would be, what foreign policy should look like, what things should be balanced, what things should be allowed to pretty much run free, unregulated. No one knows any of that stuff because they either didn't want to pay attention or they were hardly taught it in the first place. So I would have to say it really is a combination of all four. But if we had to go with a prevailing two, I would say it's a lack of it's social media addiction and a lack of education and largely a prevailing ignorance that is plaguing the nation at the moment. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And we are starting to go overtime tonight, folks. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Grr, who puts in a 5 once again and says countries like Poland have no Amazon, and yet the same thing still happens to brick and mortar stores and small businesses. It's just how progress works.
Thank you for the support. Perhaps that's the case. But beyond that, there always was regulation in the past to make sure that some businesses would succeed while others were becoming wildly competitive. And it's something that a lot of people don't know about. Like, for example, the railroads could have killed, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, when trucking first came into existence in the 1910s and 20s here in this country, railroads were actually poised to murder the whole trucking industry from the outset. If the railroads had been allowed by the ICC to lower their rates, they would have literally killed the trucking industry before it was even born, really. But the ICC said they couldn't do that because that would be destroying the trucking industry's jobs and also the kind of impact that they're making on the economy. So the railroads would have to be forced to keep their rates at a competitive level to the trucking industry, but not a predatory level where they could destroy them. And that's what led to the trucking industry growing big enough to where it makes up pretty much half of the ground transportation in the country these days. And railroads make up the other half. It was through that heavy kind of government regulation. And people could say, oh, it's just progress for the railroads to kill the trucking industry, or it's progress for the interstate system to pretty much kill off passenger rail, or for airlines to do that. But that's just not how the country ever was managed or ran throughout most of its industrialized history. There was always a decent amount of regulation to ensure that people's livelihoods couldn't be just destroyed with the swipe of a brush over the next 5 years of economic progress. We've always tried to make sure to protect everyone's interests and to allow for new technology to grow or new concepts to grow and flourish, but at the same time to protect those to protect the industries of old for the large part and make sure that they also still have a place in this emerging and evolving kind of a world. And nowadays we just don't see that, and I feel like that is a massive excessive oversight by the government, and one that should be clearly addressed, because it is the responsibility of the government to its constituents to protect them. Like, sure, we could always say that the wheels of progress are turning, but if we're saying that, then we should get rid of minimum wage, because minimum wage is destroying the wheels of progress. Cheap labor is what these companies need to ensure this progress, and if our aim is to achieve progress at any means, then we should make sure to completely destroy any concept of luxury or assurance for the citizenry for the sake of progress. And that's just not how we've done it, and that's not how we should do it. We should try and balance progress with comfort and security for people who are out there in the working world. I think that's how we should do it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. I think it wants to give us support and help this channel to keep on running. But I always think that the government has a responsibility, like it always has, to regulate and balance, so that way we can make sure that everyone is able to live the best life they can, and, you know, pretty much just not have the wheels of progress running everyone over all the time. Because it would have always done that if there wasn't some government regulation stopping that and making sure that people could live a comfortable life at the job that they were originally working at. And so with that, thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Win the Dog, who puts in a $3 donation. And thank you very much, Win, for that support, and we do appreciate it. We also have a 3 from Blazat as well, who said LOT, LSA, and a big shout out to Blazat and Win the Dog for that support. We also have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment, and he said, LSA, hit the like button, that's an order.
And hit the like button. That is in order. And I got to thank you for the incredible support, LSA Sergeant Vimy. You've been throwing in that support every single night like an actual soldier. And I got to thank you massively for that. And also, 3,600 people hit the like button, which is pretty impressive, actually. And so a huge thanks to you once again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Slack Z, who puts in a 2 and says, Russia's icebreaker fleet, U.S. Coast Guard R&D plan 2025.
And I got to thank you for the support. And I have heard about the icebreakers being built in significant numbers, because we are trying to open up the shipping lanes and ensure that they're open through the Northwest Passage these days, which is a really interesting kind of a thing. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Drew, who puts in a 2 and says, the only new world conflict media, peace reigns.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words and support. And hopefully peace will reign one day, but with how things work around here, there will almost always be war. Unfortunately, we'll probably be in business for a good time covering this kind of stuff. But still, I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one also goes to Drew, who puts in a 2. He said, back a few, Hatman Real, Poppy Playtime Path for Life.
Thank you for the support. I don't know about the Hat Man. I think that's like a Benadryl thing. But I do thank you for the support. And also, Poppy Playtime is actually a pretty interesting game series. Very interesting story that they've laid out over the time of that game. I usually play it with friends watching, like on a live stream. I don't do game streams, so usually it's just a close group of friends, and I'll stream it to them. But we usually have a fun time, and it's very interesting. Each time the chapters come out, you get to get a whole new part of the story, and they actually do quite a good job at making the stories, although some people are real critics out there and say that it sucks. I found all 4 chapters to be quite enjoyable in my opinion. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we still have a $2 super chat from 2 hot dog guys, 1 cup of snow. This is LOT LSA, Slav Ukraine, and Pimp Marmot, please.
And I think we can get the Pimp Marmot out here. Let me go to Canva real quick and
get him out here. Get him out.
Let me go get my Pimp Marmot. Where in the world is it? Actually, y'all can actually see the thumbnail studio here. I'll just show that to y'all here real quick. The thumbnail studio. This is where we make all of our thumbnails. Pimp Marmot should be in here somewhere. Eventually? Eventually? Where in the world did the Pimp Marmot go?
Where is he?
Where?
There he is.
Oh, there it is!
Oh, hello there. Hello there, Governor. Would you care for a pimp? A little cane here. We have a little bit of cane. We have a little bit of tail, a little bit of rock. When he's not pimping, he's selling. But what said to fly?
Aw, man, I'm actually working at a hot dog stand now. Aw, man, life is tough. Aw, man, I gotta tell you, man. Aw, man. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you so much for the support, and thank you for wanting the Pimp Marmot. We haven't pulled out the Pimp Marmot in a long time, apparently, because there was literally an endless slew of thumbnails I had to get through to get to it. But I do thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And it is now time to get to our live chat questions proper. It's time to get our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, Dave Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, Arabella Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said Morse decode for day 1176. Russia is already ending the peace talks before they started. Pretty insulting for real. And LLT, LSA.
And and that's the sound of money, and that was dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I gotta congratulate you massively for getting that correct. It's a really amazing thing to see the Lee Spring Army Citadel Corps has been able to get that correct once again. And you'll continue to get that correct every single time. So a massive shout out to you. A massive congratulations to a lot of you. And so with that, it is time for us to get on into the live chat questions. Of course, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we will only be able to grab 3. I tell you, not with 3, we can't, not with 3. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And that viewer right here in the live chat segment here is going to go to, well, I was going to take that one, but I think we already know the answer to that one, so I'm going to get a different one instead. Canada is sovereign said, how long does it take for that jet to arrive? Meaning the Russian jet intercepting the whole situation in the Gulf of Finland, because the ship had direct comms to the Russian military.
Probably not that long. I would assume from takeoff time to when it made it there, probably about less than an hour, maybe even 40 or 30 minutes or less. It wouldn't be that far away, though, because these aircraft are flying close to supersonic speeds, and that is a distance most likely from a nearby Russian airfield, which we are not finding at this moment. Wait, hold up. That is the Pushkin Airport. It appears that there was a military airfield down here, and that is not a military airfield. It once was, you can tell, but certainly not now. But let's just say it took off from this area just to give a rough idea of the location. So that would be a distance of about 200 miles, and considering that they're flying at about 600 miles, 700 miles an hour, they would be able to make it out there, even if it was at the very opening of the mouth of the Gulf of Finland, in about 20 minutes or so. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and that question is going to go to David Tablet, who said, is there by chance a Russian troop buildup near the Estonian border?
I haven't heard of a major troop buildup near the Estonian border. We have heard that there's a decent Russian presence near the border throughout most of the war, but I haven't heard of a noticeable buildup, at least at this moment. We have heard, however, of a Russian buildup along the Finnish border, especially close to the area of Vyborg, within the Leningrad military district, which is suggesting that they are starting to create a new NATO front in this area, as Finland is a NATO member, but I haven't heard of a major military buildup along Estonia's borders, at least particularly at this moment. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is lucky last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is none other than, guess who? It goes to Activista, who said, how do you proceed not knowing the whole story as both a nation and as a NATO and UN member?
That is a very good question. And can you reread that again, Matthew? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding. Did they say, how do you proceed without knowing the full story as a NATO member?
Yeah, they said, how do you proceed not knowing the whole story as both a nation and as a NATO and UN member?
For some reason, I'm not really understanding exactly what the first part's meaning. Can you explain to me how you're understanding it?
Let's see here. I think Activista meant to say, let's see here. How do you proceed not knowing the whole story as both a nation? I think the big question is on what topic. I think Activista is referring to the situation in the Gulf of Finland. I think, but at the same time, I think we might have to get a different one, because now that I'm reading it a second time, I'm not sure if I know the subject of it. So sadly, Activista's already left as well, so sadly I can't ask. But we'll have to grab a different one instead. So this one, this last live chat question of the night, that will be the last one of the night, goes to Chris Inman, who said, has Germany applied their sanctions against Russia yet that they said they were going to put on them?
We haven't heard that they've applied them yet. We have heard that Europe has cooked up a new round of sanctions, and they're currently implementing them at the moment, but I don't think that they've gone into effect just yet. I think it'll probably take several days, or there may be a put in effect date where once a certain amount of days or weeks has passed, the sanctions will be put into full effect, or it could be an order where effective immediately upon the passing of those new sanctions, they are put into effect. Unfortunately, I do not know those details at the moment, but generally, there's usually a few days or and immediately after the effect of the passing of that order that the sanctions are put in place. So if we're going down a middle approach, I would say most likely as soon as they're put into effect, and right now I still believe they are passing those new waves of sanctions as the European Union. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all once again for watching tonight. I have to say that the viewership was unbelievable. We reached a peak viewership of 10.6 thousand people over the course of the stream, and 84,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to be the one telling y'all the news that's going on around the world each and every single day. And of course, we will see you all tomorrow, and if there is enough news, we will be making a short war video. I will be the one that y'all will be hearing on that short war video tomorrow, but we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all once again for joining us tonight on this great night of news. Of course, big news to cover today, and we will see you tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly War News stream, and midday as well if the Enforcer has enough news to cover on that midday video. But thank you all once again for being here all tonight. We appreciate every single one of you, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
On